Hello everyone, and thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. Come with me into a mysterious space, where ghosts still silently linger. This story will take you into an old theater, where every step seems to lead you into the unexplainable. Prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear may make you not dare to step into a dark place again. I am the janitor for a large building in the city center. Not a very glamorous job, but it brought peace and long nights in the cold darkness of the 18th floor, where I was tasked with inspecting and maintaining the safety of the building. Every night, I climb up there, facing a deserted, gloomy space, with unfinished traces of an unfinished project. Even though I was used to that scene, a strange feeling, an inexplicable presence, always followed me, like a cold wind that never left. That night, like every other night, I entered the building when it was dark. The overhead lights were only weak rays of light, dark shadows stretching across the walls. The building is almost abandoned at night. The workers left, leaving behind traces of unfinished business, cracked walls and exposed pipes like unhealed wounds. But what makes me feel wrong is not those failures. Something behind the walls, behind the darkness, makes me feel like I'm not alone. I have never liked going to the 18th floor at night. Never. There is something strange always lingering in the air. An unnatural stillness, as if this space had never been completed, not only physically but also sensory. The plastic panels covering the windows shook with every wind, and the electric wires dangled from the ceiling like invisible spider threads, touching my skin when I wasn't paying attention. No one was working at the moment, and everything was so quiet that I could hear my own breathing, a reminder that I was in a place where no one else dared to go. I held a flashlight, the light was dim enough for me to see the road ahead. My footsteps echoed in the empty space. Everything around me is not okay. Dark shadows kept dancing on the unfinished walls. The windows were covered, the light from outside was only enough to create distorted shapes, like mysterious creatures looking at me from the darkness. Every step I take seems to bring a strange wave of vibrations in this space. I can't explain this feeling. It was like someone was standing behind me, watching my every move, just waiting for me to turn around and pounce on me. That feeling, the feeling of being watched, made me uncomfortable. For the first time in my time working here, I felt like I was facing something beyond my understanding. I tried to ignore that feeling, telling myself that it was just an illusion caused by stress and fatigue. But as I kept walking, as I kept shining my flashlight through the dark hallways, it became clearer and clearer. Everything started from a strange reflection. A faint, unrecognizable figure stood silently on the opposite side of the room. I turned around immediately, hoping it was just a ladder or some device so I could explain the strangeness. But nothing. Just empty space. I told myself it was just a hallucination, but that strange feeling stuck with me, as if it was trying to tell me something. That night, I felt that presence even more clearly. I continued walking through the long hallways, feeling like I was being forced into a dark corner that I couldn't escape from. Every slight noise, every fluctuation of space startled me. And then, I saw it. A shadow of a person. A figure stood quietly in the darkness, where the plastic panels covering the windows began to shake from the cold wind. I stopped suddenly, almost dropping the flashlight. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The figure did not move. It stood there, silent, like part of the darkness. I felt cold from it, as if it wasn't a living thing. It felt as if I was looking at a ghost, something dead, but unable to leave this place. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at that black shadow, not daring to move, not daring to turn back. That shadow, even though it didn't move, made me feel like I was being squeezed in an invisible grip. And then, for a brief moment, I felt a cold breeze run down my spine, as if someone had whispered in my ear. I turned around, but didn't see anyone. Everything remains the same. But that feeling of being watched, of not being able to leave. I can't explain this strange feeling. That shadow, that faint shadow, seemed to be part of the night, something that did not belong to this world. I tried to do one last check before leaving, but my steps kept getting heavier, as if an invisible weight was pulling me back. That night, I couldn't leave the 18th floor until morning. And when I returned home, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. That shadow, it still follows me, somewhere, in the darkness. After that night, I couldn't shake the strange feeling the shadow left behind. Every step I took into the building seemed to become a battle with myself. I tried to forget it, telling myself it was just an illusion, but the feeling of being watched never left me. Every time I turned back to look at the plastic covering the window, that shadowy figure appeared in my mind. A week later, I continued my work and went to the 18th floor to check. The building didn't have many workers at night, but the light from the street lamps from outside filtered through the plastic panels covering the windows, casting strange shadows on the walls. There seems to be something wrong with those shadows. The shapes were distorted and constantly changing as if someone was moving behind them, even though no one was there. That night, I no longer felt just a shadow. I feel like I'm not alone in this space. There was something lurking, a presence that I couldn't touch, but could clearly feel. There was a stinging feeling in my chest, as if my heart was beating faster every time I walked towards the deserted hallways. As I approached the end of the hallway, my flashlight suddenly went out. It's not because the battery is low, but like some force is interfering. I stopped, my hands shaking as I tried to turn the flashlight back on. But it's not bright. In the darkness, there was only me and the sound of my own rapid breathing. Suddenly, I heard a very small sound. There was a light sound of footsteps, like someone was walking behind me. I turned around, but there was no one. There was only darkness and empty hallways. But I couldn't deny there was something strange in the air. I could feel a presence behind me, as if there was someone standing there, so close that I could feel their cold breath. I turned around and looked into the deep darkness, trying to regain my composure. I continued walking, but this time I didn't dare look back. My footsteps were heavy, each step echoed in the empty space. I can't shake the feeling that someone is watching my every move, my every look. Everything became blurred in my eyes. The light from the flashlight became weaker and weaker, as if it was being sucked away by an invisible force. I stopped in front of a large room at the end of the hallway. A room that I never dared to enter. The metal door was rusted and looked like it hadn't been opened in a while. At this moment, I felt like I was drawn towards it, not because of curiosity but because something compelled me to come closer. Pushing the door open, I felt like I was opening another world. The space in the room is not a normal space. It was a stagnant space, cold and full of strange sounds. Everything in this room seemed frozen in a strange way. The furniture, upholstered chairs that had faded over time, remained still as if they were waiting for something. I walked in, feeling like an intruder in a world that didn't belong to me. Then I realized, in the middle of the room there was a large mirror. This mirror does not reflect my image. Instead, it reflects another silhouette. A faint figure stood motionless, but its eyes were staring at me. I couldn't believe my eyes, but I knew clearly that that shadow was not me. It looks like me, but it's not me. And what's even more strange is that I feel that shadow is smiling. The laugh didn't come out loud, but I felt the mockery in it. A cold laugh echoed in my head. I wanted to turn around, wanted to run away immediately, but I couldn't move. I stood there, as if hypnotized, unable to leave the sight of that shadow. Suddenly, I heard a loud noise. A strong wind blew, and when I turned around, the mirror was broken. The pieces fell to the floor, and among the pieces, the shadow stood still, staring at me. There was nothing left, only fragments of the mirror remained, and I stood there, not daring to move. At that moment, I heard a soft sigh, as if someone was standing right behind me. I turned back quickly, but this time I didn't see anyone. There was no one, but I could feel that presence. And then, before I could do anything, darkness enveloped me completely, as if the space itself had swallowed me into its heart. That whole night, I couldn't sleep. The shadow in the mirror still haunts me, but not just because of its strange appearance, but because of the ridicule I felt from it. That shadow, even though there was no sound, could make me feel like I was being watched and controlled. Like something waited for me in the dark, waiting for me to enter and discover its truth. After that night, I didn't dare to go back immediately. But work cannot be postponed. I needed to go to the 18th floor to complete the examination, even though fear and tension still followed me. The second night, when I entered the building, the air became thicker and colder than ever. Every step seems to be imprisoned in an invisible space. The walls were still rough slabs of concrete, but I no longer looked at them the same way. They were like the walls of a prison, trapping me in darkness from which I could not escape. This time, I didn't go up alone. I brought a small camera with me, hoping to record what happened during the night. Maybe, if I could capture the strange images, would have a better understanding of what was going on. But when I started walking up to the 18th floor, a cold feeling ran down my spine. I felt like there was a cold gaze watching me, no matter where I went. I opened the door, and immediately, I felt the difference. This building is not like the previous nights. My feeling, the space, the air, all changed. There was something about the room that made me feel like I was entering another world, where time and space no longer had any meaning. My camera started making noise. My shadow on the screen was no longer clear. It felt like it was being pulled out of sight, as if an invisible force was interfering with everything. I started to feel tired. This feeling is not just a normal fear. It's like a vivid nightmare where I can't wake up. Noises began to ring out, softly from the end of the hallway. I turned around, only to see a small black shadow, like a cloud of smoke, moving quickly back and forth in my vision. The camera wobbled. I tried to stay calm. But the feeling of fear began to overwhelm. Everything around me became blurred and unclear. The shadows were no longer normal shapes. They began to take on shapes, strange patterns, as if they were coming to life. Those dark shadows began to surround me. I turned my back, not daring to look anymore, but I heard giggling. Not anyone else's, but my own, echoing from inside my head. I didn't dare look at the dark shadows following me. I just tried to walk faster, but my legs felt heavy and I couldn't move quickly. It felt like an invisible hand was pulling me back. And then, in the dim light of the flashlight, I saw it, a silhouette standing in the middle of the hallway, at the end of the room. This time, it wasn't a faint silhouette, but a clearer shape. It looks like a human, but it's not. It was a creature with inexplicable details. Its skin was pale white, its eyes bulged and opened wide as if it wanted to suck my soul. My camera turned off again. It felt like everything around me stopped. That shadow stood there, not moving, but its eyes still watched me, and I could feel the coldness, the hostility in them. A feeling like I'm bound by that look, unable to escape, unable to run away. I can't bear it anymore. I turned around and ran towards the door. The door doesn't open. The door cannot be opened. I banged on it, but nothing changed. Nothing has changed. And then, I heard footsteps behind me, from somewhere very close. The sound of footsteps was light and steady, as if someone was approaching. I turned around, but this time, there was no one left. All that's left is me and the darkness. The space became so heavy that I felt like the air around me had thickened and I couldn't breathe. That shadow has disappeared, but the feeling of it has never left. It is still lurking somewhere in the air, as if breathing with me, following my every step with invisible eyes. A mysterious presence, hard to name, but so real. And I knew, this time, I couldn't escape. It's not because the door is locked, but because that shadow found me. The 18th floor is no longer simply part of an abandoned building. It has turned into its own realm, a distorted world between reality and illusion. Every night I came back, things got worse. Curvy hallways. Doors that lead nowhere. Hissing sounds in the darkness. I tried to leave. But I can't. This place, it call I'm back. As if I were bound to it, or had been a part of it all along. What I see is no longer darkness. They are living shapes, flickering like fire, but cold to the bone. They move between the walls. They whispered in a non-human language. And I know, soon, I will become a part of them too. That night, I entered the 18th floor again, but this time I had the feeling that I wasn't the only one here. The air was thick and stuffy, making it impossible for me to breathe. Everything becomes different. The plastic panels on the windows no longer vibrate because of the wind like before. There was no sound, only a still, heavy silence like a fog surrounding me. I turned on the flashlight, but the light from the flashlight was only enough to illuminate a short distance in front of me. I continued walking, and each step felt like a strong kickback, awakening strange feelings. It feels like I'm walking on unstable ground, as if it could collapse at any moment. But when I looked down, the ground was still solid, nothing had changed. The scariest thing was that I started to feel a change in the space around me. The eerie figures no longer stood still. They started moving, but not in the usual way I see. These shadows were as if made from white sheets, floating in mid-air, twisting and contorting as if they were not of this world. One of the shadows started moving towards me. Unlike the previous shadows, this shadow had a clear shape. It was a creature with a large head, eyes glowing like fire, and its mouth opened wide, revealing sharp teeth. Every time it moved, the air seemed to get colder. A cold feeling ran down my spine as I looked into its eyes. My camera suddenly turned back on, this time recording the entire scene. I didn't dare look at the screen, but I knew I was seeing something inexplicable. That shadow, that creature was moving towards me, step by slow step, as if it knew I couldn't escape. I can't move. Every muscle in my body felt frozen. I couldn't take my eyes off that shadow. When the creature came close to me, I heard its breathing. Each breath was like a cold wind penetrating my body. I felt like it wanted to swallow me into the deep darkness from which it came. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard the door open, a door appearing from nowhere. This door was not on the building's blueprints, but it appeared right before my eyes. The shadow stopped, turned and walked towards the door. I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew this was my only chance to escape it. I rushed towards the door, my heart pounding, but each step felt like I weighed a ton more. It felt like someone was pulling me back, an invisible force attached to the shadow that was gradually disappearing into the darkness. The door closed just as I was about to approach, but it wasn't an ordinary door. This door has a strange light coming from the gap. The light is like the light of a fire, but not warm at all. I hastily turned the doorknob, and this time, it opened. Inside was a pitch-black room, with nothing except an old armchair placed in the middle of the room. I don't know why I walked in, but I felt an invisible urge forcing me to sit there. As I sat down, a different feeling enveloped me. This room doesn't seem to belong in this building. Everything here seems older, darker, as if it came from another era. And then, I realized, there were strange marks on the wall. The drawings and symbols are like an ancient language, but carry an unspeakable obsession. The camera continued to record everything, but at this point, I no longer dared to look at the screen. The markings on the wall began to move. They twisted and writhed like living things, like they were trying to tell some story that I couldn't understand. My eyes began to feel heavy. I felt like I was being hypnotized, and then suddenly, I found myself falling into a trance. Everything became blurry, but strange images kept appearing in my mind. I saw those shadows, these strange creatures, all waiting for me in the endless darkness. And then I realized, I wasn't the only one trapped in this place. There were other shadows, strange, silent creatures lurking in the darkness, watching me with shapeless eyes. They said nothing. They just waited. as if I were the final piece to an unfinished ritual. An invisible, cold presence enveloped me, as if inviting, or forcing, me to join the gloomy world they inhabited. I don't know if I can still leave this place. This building, it is no longer a work in progress. It has become a hell, no escape, no light, no boundary between reality and illusion. And those creatures, they don't just exist in the dark. They have merged into me, like a part of my body, a part of my memory. I wonder, am I still me? Or have I begun to transform, and one day, I will also wander in that dark hallway, like one of them? Then I woke up. No more strange rooms. Only the dim light of fluorescent lights remained in the building's hallway. My body felt heavy, as if I had just trudged through a never-ending nightmare. My lips were dry, my breathing was ragged. But in my mind, the image of the shadows remained intact. They haven't left yet. They are still there, in every hidden corner, every dark space, watching me. And deep inside, I know. I haven't really woken up yet. I couldn't believe what I went through. Everything was like a nightmare, but not an ordinary dream. A feeling of gloom still enveloped me, as if I were living in a parallel world where there was no way out. Everything around me no longer seems the same as before. The whole space, this whole building, had a strange sound, like soft whispers that couldn't be heard clearly, like curses echoing in my ears, urging me not to dare turn around, not to dare look at the darkest places. When I tried to stand up, my legs felt weak, but I knew I couldn't stop. This building, it had become a part of me, as if I had been imprisoned in a space where time no longer had any meaning. I can't go back. I can't give up. I walked out of the room, but everything around me changed again. The walls are no longer ordinary walls, but the walls of a strange world. The corridors stretch endlessly, with no escape, and shadows appear and disappear. I heard light footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, I saw no one. There is only darkness. The darkness was as thick as an invisible net surrounding me. I couldn't stop, I couldn't turn around, because I knew that if I did, I would become part of that darkness. Every step I took became heavier, as if I was trying to escape an endless spiral. But the more I walked, the more I realized something strange: this building has no exit. The windows, which had been covered with thick plastic sheets, were no longer light-blocking curtains. They are now permanent, unbreakable walls. I touched one of the plastic panels, and suddenly, I felt a strong resistance, as if the plastic was reacting to my touch. My lip trembled as I felt the tension in the air, as if these walls were watching me, watching my every move. Suddenly, I heard another sound. A soft sigh, from behind. I turned around quickly, but this time, I didn't see a shadow or any strange creature. Instead, I saw a large door, a door I had never seen before. A glossy black wooden door, with cracks and stains on the surface. I don't know why, but I feel like this door is the only way out of here. I walked towards that door, my heart racing. When I touched the doorknob, I felt a strange vibration, a cold air blowing out from inside the room behind the door. I opened the door, and immediately, I felt a cold wave invade my body. The door opened, and I entered another space. The space behind the door is not an ordinary room. It is a vast place, without limits. The room was dark, but on the walls I saw strange shapes, ancient symbols drawn in black ink, like the ones I had seen on the walls in the previous room. Those shapes shook and moved like living creatures, as if they were watching my every move, waiting for something. I continued walking in, but I didn't dare look at those strange shapes. I heard a whisper, an indistinct sound, unable to make out every word. It was like a curse from another world, a world I couldn't understand. The whispers grew louder and louder, as if they were trying to invade my mind, pushing me into a dazed state. At this point, I could no longer control myself. The images, the shadows, the breathing sounds, all of them were like a tsunami crashing into me. I saw that shadow, a shadow I couldn't forget, standing in a dark corner of this room. The shadow didn't move, but I knew it was looking at me, waiting. Its red eyes, like flames, lit up in the darkness. I can't bear it anymore. I turned around and ran towards the door. But as I approached, the door was no longer a door. It's gone. I stood there, confused, not knowing what to do. Everything around me started to change. The shapes on the wall are now more than just symbols. They became real creatures. They began to move, crawling up from the wall, rushing towards me. I feel surrounded. I can't run away. I can't escape this space. I began to feel that presence, a presence that I couldn't see, but felt very clearly. An invisible force was pulling me in, as if I had become a part of this space. And then, I understood something. No one can escape this 18th floor. It's not just a part of the building. It was an entity, a place that rose from the darkness, and I became a part of it. The 18th floor is no longer a floor. It is a realm. A ghostly dimension where souls are trapped forever. Where shadows never disappear, still quietly observing, hunting, and turning every intruder into a part of themselves. This story has no end. Because this building is an endless loop. The shadows still exist, lurking in dark corners. The deformed creatures still quietly moved, waiting for their next prey. The 18th floor is not a place to escape. It is a hell, a place where there are no boundaries, where there is no time, where all laws are distorted. And I got into it. I'm no longer the one who walks in here. I am part of that darkness, the whisper in the night, the eyes watching from the cold crack in the wall. I cannot explain. But I know. This building is a trap, inescapable, incomprehensible. Every step I take, every time I turn back, I just sink deeper into that unknown space. A place with no exit. A place where a strange presence still follows, waiting, inviting me to take another step. And I realized. It is no longer a place. It is one status. One survival. A part of me, forever inescapable. My steps slowed down when I realized that. Each sound of my breathing became heavier, my chest felt like it was being compressed. The whole space around me began to be darker than ever. The walls began to fall towards me, as if they were shrinking, forcing me into the middle of a space too small to escape. That feeling, as if this space was swallowing me up little by little. I heard a noise. At first there were gentle sounds, whispers from somewhere, like reminders. But as I got closer, the sounds became clearer, into words. Words that I couldn't understand, but sounded like threats. I turned around, my heart pounding. Everything around me now began to change. The building is no longer just a lifeless space. It had become a living creature, with invisible powers drawing me into its darkness. With every step I took, I felt like I was being pulled toward the shadows that were slowly filling the room, strange creatures that I couldn't place. Suddenly, the light from the flashlight I was holding turned off. I couldn't believe my eyes, not because the flashlight ran out of battery, but because it turned off in a strange way, as if it had been taken away by some invisible force. In the darkness, I tried to turn the light back on, but couldn't. I felt the coldness enveloping me, my every breath seemed to be choked. And in that darkness, I heard noises, footsteps. It's getting closer. I couldn't guess who it was, but I felt the presence. I felt like there was some creature, with a strange appearance, watching me from afar. With each passing second, the cold feeling in my body became more pronounced. They were no ordinary shadows. They are living beings, beings with a power that I cannot match. Suddenly, from the darkness, a strange figure appeared. It was a monster, with a translucent body and eyes as bright as fire. It didn't move, but a strange movement in the air could be felt. Its eyes looked straight at me, as if reading my thoughts. It didn't have to move, but I felt its closeness, as if it were standing right behind me. A loud noise rang out. The heavy breathing of this monster made me unable to bear it any longer. I turned around, but immediately, I was overwhelmed by a thick wave of darkness. I can't see anything. Only me and the darkness remained. The feeling of being surrounded, trapped, is the only feeling I can feel right now. I can't leave. I know that if I continue to move forward, I will fall deeper and deeper into this space. But if I turned back, I knew I would have to face those creatures, those shadows that had been waiting for me. I started running, not because I wanted to escape, but because I had no choice. Every step I took echoed in the quiet space. The sound of my footsteps mixed with the footsteps of unseen creatures. Suddenly, a cold hand touched my shoulder, causing me to turn around in surprise. But when I looked, I only saw darkness, no one standing behind me. I walked faster, my heart beating strongly in my chest. Everything around me now seems bent and distorted. The space felt upside down, as if I was living in a twisted world and couldn't escape. The door in front of me suddenly appeared. I ran towards it, without thinking. I knew that if I didn't get out now, I would become a part of this place. I pushed the door open. But what I see is not the way out. It's another room, identical to the original room. Everything repeats. Plastic panels cover the windows, the concrete walls are empty. I turned around, but the door was gone. I can't get out. This feeling is a trap with no way out. Every night I come back here. The building has become a part of me, an inseparable part. The shadows, the strange creatures, all are not hallucinations. They are living beings, souls trapped in this dimension. And now, I am also a part of them. Part of it cannot escape. I don't know where to start, don't know what to do. With each passing day, I felt myself sinking deeper and deeper into obscurity, into a strange world that I couldn't explain. Everything was spinning in my head. This building, this 18th floor, is more than just a place where I have to work. It has become a part of me. An inseparable part, like an eternal curse that cannot be erased. Every step I took, I felt like I was entering a never-ending nightmare. As I walked out of the dark hallways, I saw those walls change again. They are no longer as simple as before. The cracks in the walls, the peeling layers of lime, now look like gaping mouths, as if they are swallowing the space around them. I started hearing more strange noises. Whispers, calls of my name, soft laughter in the dark. Sometimes I feel an invisible force pulling me towards the end of the hallway. The shadows no longer just move on the wall. They can now move through space, emerging from the cracks in the floor, from the scratches on the door, like terrifying monsters from another world. Their fiery red eyes always followed me, whispering stories that I couldn't understand. I can't stop, not even for a second. Every time I turn around, I see them closer. Those creatures were watching me, watching my every move. And I feel that this building is more than just a place of darkness. It's a trap. A trap that I cannot disentangle. Every night, I return to the 18th floor. Every time I think I've found a way out, that way leads me to another room. A room I've seen before, a room I can't escape from. A room filled with strange drawings and symbols that I couldn't understand, but I could feel the darkness in them. There were blood stains on the floor, and those creatures, dark shadows, stood looking at me, waiting. Tonight, I entered again. But this time, it wasn't just darkness. I could feel the distinct presence of something. A strong suction pulled me towards the center of the building, as if some force was trying to take me even deeper. I don't know what it is, but I feel that gloom. It's surrounding me, grabbing me every step of the way. Once again, I heard soft breathing and strange footsteps. I turned around, but didn't see anyone. However, in the back of my mind, I know for sure that I am not alone. I'm not the only one here. A figure appeared from the darkness, a shadowy black shadow with no clear shape, only bright red eyes shining, staring at me. It said nothing. But I could feel the whisper in my mind, a statement I couldn't hear but felt clearly. Run, if you still can. I don't know why I listened to it, but I started running. Yes, I run, not because I want to but because something inside me forces me to run. That shadow was still behind me, not moving, but always appearing in my vision, always present somewhere in the darkness. I can't run forever. The more I ran, the more I felt like I was caught in a vortex with no way out. The windows are no longer windows. They are now like solid, impenetrable walls. I crashed into a wall in a hallway, but when I turned around, I found myself right back in the same place, in front of another room, identical to the previous ones. Every crack, every trace of old blood, every shadow repeats like an endless nightmare. I stood there, panting, not having the strength to run anymore. The space around me began to change. The walls began to bleed, strange symbols on the walls shook, like living, breathing and writhing creatures. The sound of my breathing mixed with that shadow's breathing, and I understood that I could no longer escape. That shadow is no longer a dim black shadow. It took shape, and I realized something, that shadow was me. A version of me, but not me. It is what I left behind in the dark. And I, now cannot escape it. I have become a part of the 18th floor. A part of this darkness. Every step I take, every breath blends into that darkness. This building is not just a place. It is a living thing, a place with no escape, a place I cannot leave. This building never stops waiting for new people, who are drawn into its vortex. And now, I am a part of it. An inseparable part. This space, this building, has become a part of me. With every step, every movement in the dark, I felt the dark circle tightening around me. The walls, the endless hallways, they were all slowly swallowing me up, like a giant eyeless monster that saw everything. I'm not me anymore. I'm no longer the only one here. I realized it when I entered another room, this time, not an ordinary room. Everything here is hazy, as if covered by a thick layer of fog. There is no light, no darkness, only a quiet space that covers everything. But no, it's not quiet. It is the dead silence, the silence of what has passed, of souls trapped between this world and another world. I don't dare breathe. I just stood there, looking around, trying to find a way out. But the walls around me are not ordinary walls anymore. It was as if they were changing, flowing out like a black river, as if these walls were not just matter but part of this darkness, part of the presence that held me. And then, I heard a sound. At first it was just a whisper. But as I listened, it became clear statements, haunting whispers. They were words I had never heard before, words I couldn't understand, but felt their rhythm in my body. These words are running through my mind like sharp knives, cutting into my soul. Run away, but you'll never escape. Those words were like a knife stabbed deep into my mind, leaving me unable to move, unable to do anything other than stand inert in the middle of this haunted room. A black shadow appeared from the darkness, gradually forming before my eyes. I couldn't distinguish what it was, only that it was something that existed beyond my understanding. Its eyes, two deep black holes, looked at me as if they wanted to swallow me into their darkness. It said nothing. It just looked at me. Those eyes were like fire, hot and shining in the dark. But when I tried to look again, it disappeared again. Everything seems to be back to normal, but I know it hasn't gone anywhere. It was an illusion, a trick of this darkness, so that I no longer had the strength to resist. I started to feel changes in my body. Not the usual fatigue, but a heavy, inescapable feeling, like invisible roots were clinging to me, pulling me down, pulling me into a deep abyss where I couldn't see the bottom. Everything around me began to spin, all shapes became blurred. I can't differentiate between what is real and what is a dream. This darkness has not only taken over space, but it has begun to take over my mind. The feeling of paralysis gradually covered me, my every thought became chaotic. I can't think clearly anymore. Strange images appeared again, strange shapes that I could not imagine. Those shadows danced again, curled up like living creatures, looking at me with cold eyes full of challenge. They don't need to say anything. Their eyes said it all. And then I realized that I wasn't just stuck in this space. I'm stuck in my own mind. This darkness has invaded every corner of my mind. It wasn't just creatures waiting for me. It's despair, it's fear, it's pain that I can't escape. I am no longer someone trapped in a strange space. I am a part of it. Dark shadows began to surround me, closer and closer, and in that moment, I felt like I had become a part of them. I am darkness. I am this presence, these creatures that wait in the darkness. I can't escape it anymore. I squirmed, trying to wake up, but every time I opened my eyes, I found myself drawn into this space, into an endless maze. Every hallway led me back to this very room, where I had seen shadows, strange creatures, and strange symbols. And then I realized, I no longer had a sense of time. Everything becomes an endless loop. This building, with all its terror and its eternal darkness, has become an eternal trap. And I can't escape. The 18th floor is not just a place to work. It is another world. A world where souls, shadows are waiting. A world that I have become a part of. I can't tell the difference between day and night anymore. The sense of time has been erased, as if this space has stripped me of everything I once knew. Everything seemed like endless loops, a series of blurred and painful memories that I couldn't escape. The truth no longer exists in this space. I couldn't tell where I was or what I was doing anymore. I can only feel the heavy, dark feeling filling every corner of my mind. Plastic panels on windows are not just protective layers anymore. They become shells, membranes between me and the outside world. But is there any outside world anymore? Does anything exist beyond these shadows, these creatures that surround me? I can't stop feeling them. Those dark shadows, although they had no clear shape, I knew they were always there, lurking in the dark corners, just waiting for me to turn away. That feeling of being watched grew stronger and stronger. And every time I stopped, they got closer. Every step I took, I felt like I was being pulled back, held back by some invisible force. There were times when I thought I had found a way out. I would rush towards a door, some crack, but when I got closer, it was all an illusion. The door is just an invisible wall, the walls are just layers of time debris, nothing can penetrate. And I'm back in the old loop again. That feeling of being stuck is not just about space, but also about time. It feels like I've been living in this vicious cycle for countless days, never ending. I started to feel a change in my body. My eyes blurred. My fingers began to grow cold, as if I were slowly being eroded by this darkness. I can't see things clearly anymore. The dim space, the distorted silhouettes, all are strange, yet so familiar. A continuous spiral, pulling me deeper into my own fears. I can't escape the sounds anymore. The whispering became clearer and clearer. The words are not those of one person. Soft laughter echoed in the darkness, as if they were watching me struggle with my own fear. I could hear them from every direction, echoing, silent, yet dangerous. You can't get out, never. I'm back. This time it wasn't the tiny black shadows. They were huge shapes, so huge that I couldn't believe they existed. A tall creature, with a twisted body, circled in space, with bright eyes staring at me. That look made me feel as if it wanted to devour me, not just physically but my soul. But it doesn't move. It stood there, just looking at me. Those eyes challenged me. The shadows around me began to close in, piling on top of each other, enveloping me, as if they were gathering to kill me. The space around me gradually shrunk, and I realized that I couldn't breathe. This darkness has completely taken over me. I want to run. But I can't. The darkness clung to me too tightly. My legs don't move. I stood still, in the dead silence of the 18th floor, feeling each breath become difficult, as if I were breathing in this very dark air. This feeling of heaviness is not an ordinary fear. It is an obsession, it is the cutting of my soul bit by bit, layer by layer. That presence wasn't just an invisible being. It has become a part of me. This darkness has eaten away everything left in me, not only my body but also my mind and soul. I'm not me anymore. When I tried to turn around and run, I realized there was no way out. Every step I took led me to this very place, into the very room that haunted me. The dark shadows were still there, looking at me. They didn't chase me, they didn't do anything. They just stood there, like part of the darkness, waiting for me to realize that I couldn't get out. Run, but never escape. That whisper rang out again, this time as confirmation that I was lost forever. Not just in this building, but in my own mind. I got it. I can't run anymore. I cannot escape myself. This darkness is not a force out there. It is a part of me. And I can't get out anymore. Oh, I can no longer distinguish between what is real and what is a dream. Every moment that passes, I feel myself being sucked deeper into this vortex. The shadows were no longer something I could run from, not creatures I could see clearly. They have become a part of me, existing within me, like a ghost covering every corner of my soul. When I tried to find a way out, looking for a door or a crack of light, I discovered that the doors no longer opened. They were locked tight. This space, not simply a building, is now a trap, a maze with no escape. And I realized that it wasn't like I was being held back by this building. But I fell into this trap myself. My own trap. The whispers became clearer and clearer. Words that I couldn't understand, but I felt the brutality in each word. Can't escape, there's no way out. Those words repeated over and over in my head, as if they were deeply ingrained in my mind, making me unable to think of anything else but being trapped in this very darkness. My eyes gradually blurred. Everything around me became blurry, as if they were slowly disappearing into darkness. I tried touching a wall, but it didn't feel the same anymore. It is not a concrete or brick wall. It was soft, as if I was touching an invisible membrane, a thin layer of black fabric, fragile but durable. And as I pushed harder, the wall became more than just a layer of material. It seems to be a part of myself. A wall I can't break, can't escape. I feel like I am surrounded in an invisible space, a space where all limits are erased. Sometimes, I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a maze with no way out. Each hallway led me back to the starting point, like a never-ending nightmare. I don't know where to go anymore. Suddenly, I heard a slight noise. The sound of footsteps. Light footsteps echoed on the cold concrete floor. I turned around, but didn't see anyone. Nobody. There is only darkness. A cold wind blew past, making me shiver. That cold feeling touched my skin, penetrating every cell in my body. But I know, this is not an ordinary wind. This feeling is a presence. A presence has been following me for a long time. As I continued walking, I felt something graze my hand. Something cold. An invisible force was squeezing my neck, as if I was being squeezed in an invisible fist. I panicked, trying to breathe, but the air in the building became so thick and heavy that I couldn't breathe anymore. This feeling of being surrounded and suffocated made it impossible for me to stay awake. This darkness, this space in which I am trapped, it does not just take over me physically. It entered my mind. Every thought I have is dominated by those shadows. I couldn't think of anything else but those shadows. The shadows in my head, in my mind, they are not just creatures out there but myself. I am a part of them, and they are a part of me. I continued walking, my legs felt heavier, I couldn't move fast anymore. Things got darker. I can't find the end point. I just found myself drifting in an endless space. A space with no exit, no time. An eternal space of despair. And then, I stopped. I can't walk anymore. I was completely exhausted. Dark shadows began to surround me, getting closer and closer. They are not creatures I can run away from, but parts of me. The parts that were denied to me, the parts that I couldn't escape. In that moment, I understood that I couldn't escape this building. A building is not just a place. It was a trap, and I became part of this trap. There is no way out. There is no salvation. I am part of this darkness. And I can never escape it. This feeling of not being able to escape, has penetrated deep into my bones. I no longer recognize myself. The shadows, the whispers, were no longer something I could distinguish from reality. They are a part of me, a part of my mind. I felt the cold, felt its presence surrounding me, invading every corner of my soul. All my movements now seem to be controlled by this darkness. My steps are not my decision anymore. Every step I take, every breath I take, I feel an invisible force pulling me, leading me towards death, towards the darkness that I cannot avoid. I couldn't see my way anymore. Everything is blurry, overlapping, as if this space is being bent, stretching endlessly. The feeling of fear was no longer a feeling outside of my body. It has penetrated my body, into every cell. Fear has become a part of me. I couldn't feel anything but the darkness, other than those sounds, whispers that couldn't be heard but were very clear. Every whisper is like a knife cutting deep into my mind, making it impossible for me to escape this world. Don't keep going, don't open the door, if you open the door, you'll never get back. Those words echoed in my head, not from anyone else's mouth, but from this darkness itself. A warning, a threat, or just a way for it to control me. I can't tell the difference anymore. Everything is blurry, and I can only hear that whisper. I continued, even though I knew what was waiting for me. A door appeared before my eyes. Not an ordinary door, but a black door, carved with strange drawings and symbols that I couldn't understand. This door is like a door leading into another world, a world that I can never return to. But I couldn't resist, I walked towards it. With every step I take, that door gets closer, but the space around me keeps changing. The door suddenly began to sink into the ground, as if it was sucking me inside. With each passing second, the feeling of being pulled into it grew stronger. I can't stop, I can't turn back. Dark shadows from dark corners began to surround me, as if they were also waiting for me to go through that door. Invisible creatures are waiting in the darkness behind the door. When I opened the door, a cold wind blew strongly into my face. Not the usual cold wind, but something deep, as if I had just opened a portal to hell. The space behind the door is a dark hole, an endless void with no bottom visible. I can't step in, but I can't back out either. I was caught up in that darkness, I couldn't escape anymore. An invisible hand pulled me inside, and I felt it was not a human hand. It's cold, rough, and powerful. The feeling of being held tightly in an invisible fist made me unable to breathe. I tried to struggle, but couldn't move. Darkness has enveloped me, plunging me into a world without light, without time. And then, I realized. I'm not myself anymore. This darkness has made me a part of it, a part that cannot be escaped forever. The strange shapes, the creatures I had seen, they were not things that existed outside. They are parts of me. They are dark thoughts and feelings that have been sleeping in my mind for many years, now they have awakened and dragged me here. This building is not a place. It's a trap. And I became part of this trap. An inseparable part. That light tapping sound still rang out, pulling me out of the chaotic thoughts in my head. Every time it rang out, my heart pounded in my chest, as if I could hear the very life escaping me. I stood still, flashlight shaking in my hand, trying to find the source of those strange sounds. Every step I take in this darkness makes me feel like I'm entering a nightmare with no way out. That knocking sound did not come from a worker. It was a light tapping sound, as if someone was trying to get my attention from somewhere very close, but when I turned around, there was no one. There was only darkness, and shadowy figures dancing in the narrow field of view of the flashlight. I felt a terrible feeling rising inside me. There was something lurking in this darkness, watching me from behind the translucent plastic, waiting for me to turn my back. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down, but I couldn't. I walked slowly to the end of the hallway, each step heavier, as if the ground beneath my feet was no longer solid. The shadows seemed to be coiling around me, waiting for me to make one mistake, one wrong step, so they could engulf me completely. As I neared the window where I had seen the shadow before, I again felt a sudden blast of cold wind. My lips were dry, my hands were shaking, and I began to feel the cold penetrating deep inside. The light from the flashlight shines through the plastic, but cannot illuminate the surrounding space. I felt trapped in another world, a world where every sound, every movement I made was controlled by this darkness. The knocking continued, but this time, it wasn't a light sound anymore. That knocking sound became strong thumping sounds, as if someone was trying to break the plastic sheet, wanting to escape from this space. I turned around, but saw nothing but darkness, only vague shapes on the wall, dark shadows writhing like lurking creatures. That feeling of fear is indescribable. A feeling as if something was about to grab me. I can't control myself anymore. I don't dare look back into that darkness anymore. My flashlight shined on the opaque plastic, and for a moment, I saw it. That shadow. Not a faint shadow anymore. It took shape, tall and thin, standing facing me, almost indistinguishable from the surrounding darkness. Its red eyes lit up, staring at me, full of challenge. Every feeling in my body seemed numb. I can't move. Can't scream. I just stood there, in absolute panic, looking at the shadow that I knew couldn't be a hallucination. That shadow is not part of the building. It is not part of this world. It is something beyond my understanding. And then, something strange happened. That shadow didn't move. It just stood there, but not like before. This time, it began to fade, not disappear, but like a layer of fog, gradually dissipating into the air. But it's not completely lost. A part of it is still present in the darkness, still watching me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. This time, I don't feel like they came from somewhere far away. They came from right behind me. I turned around, but didn't see anyone. My flashlight shined into the darkness, but could illuminate nothing but thin air. I felt an invisible weight gradually enveloping me. I can't breathe. It was a feeling of being submerged in water, with no space to breathe, nothing but darkness and that presence. This time, I could no longer control myself. I started running without knowing where I was running. I couldn't stop, couldn't turn around, couldn't touch anything I had ever seen. The darkness around me grew thicker and thicker, as if it were swallowing me into an endless world. And then, I stopped. My heart was pounding. My flashlight only illuminated a tiny area, and within that, I saw it. It wasn't that shadow anymore, but something larger, a strange-looking creature, standing right in front of me, staring at me with red eyes that glowed like fire. That's not a person. It's not a living organism. It was part of the darkness, and I was lost in its world. Oh, I can't move. That strange creature stood right in front of me, with fiery red eyes, looking at me without blinking. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, but my body refused to listen. Everything around me became hazy, as if the air had been swallowed by darkness, erased in haunting silence. I could feel its cold breath, each breath echoing in my head, engulfing me in inexplicable fear. That creature didn't move, but it still existed there, present in every space, in every corner of my mind. Those red eyes were like a fire burning away all reason, little by little. I can feel its presence, even when I close my eyes. It is within me, not outside me. A cold wind blew past, bringing with it a shiver. The flashlight in my hand suddenly went out, and I was completely in darkness. In that moment, I felt like I was drowning, with no more space to breathe, no more light to hope for. I didn't know if I could move, or if I was trapped in this darkness forever. My hands were cold, and I suddenly heard footsteps return. But this time, the sound didn't come from far away. It came from right behind me, walking softly, not of a person. It was a strange sound, as if something was approaching, as if I was being watched from all sides. Unable to bear it anymore, I turned around, but still couldn't see anyone. There was only darkness, only sounds, those footsteps still echoed in the air, rushing towards me. I wanted to turn around, I wanted to run out, but I couldn't. I feel trapped in this space, a space with no end. I closed my eyes again, trying to reassure myself that these were just hallucinations caused by fatigue and stress. But when I opened my eyes, I saw something strange. In front of me, the creature disappeared, but another shape appeared. It was a figure, indistinct, without clear outlines, but I knew clearly that it was not a living person. The figure stood still, but I could feel its presence, as if it was watching me, waiting for something. My heart was pounding, each beat felt like a blow to my eardrums, as if that shadow was gradually taking over the space around me. The ground beneath my feet began to shake slightly, then gradually stronger. It was a strange vibration, as if an invisible force was moving under the concrete, pulling me deeper into this darkness. I felt like I couldn't stand anymore, my legs started to weaken, and I felt the cold spreading through my body. Then, in that moment, I heard another sound. A hissing sound, as if something was rubbing against itself in the dark. I turned around, and I saw something sparkling, reflecting the dim light from the flashlight. It was a metal bar, old and dusty, like something long forgotten. But what I saw next took my breath away. It was a face, not human, but more like a distorted face, with eyes without sockets, just deep holes staring back at me. That face started moving towards me, slowly, as if it wanted to swallow me, wanted to pull me into that space. Dark shadows began to gather, surrounding me like monsters waiting for a chance to attack. I can't move. I can't scream. All I could do was stand there, unable to escape, unable to fight back. Every second, this darkness gets bigger, swallows me more. And then I realized that I had become a part of it. I cannot escape. This building, this darkness, has become an inseparable part of me. And I will forever be here, in a world without light, without life. There is only eternal darkness. I was completely disoriented. Every step I take, every breath, feels heavy as if I'm being pulled down, deeper into this darkness. No more space, no more time. There is only this mysterious darkness, no way out, no one to save me. It has become a part of me, and I, now, am a part of it. That feeling of numbness and confusion, grew stronger and stronger. I can't differentiate between what is real and what is virtual. My steps were like steps in a dream, but painful as if I were moving through layers of hard rock. Every time I turned to look, the space behind me changed. The empty walls of the hallway had transformed into distorted shapes, as if the darkness itself was bending everything to its will. The darkness is no longer something outside of me. It became something inside me. Every time I looked at the plastic covering the window, shadowy shapes appeared, not of strange creatures, but of myself, of the shadows I had seen. I realized that every time I looked there, I wasn't just seeing something out there. I saw myself, saw parts of me that I couldn't face. I stopped, my legs were shaking. In that moment, I felt like an invisible hand was squeezing my neck. Not a physical hand, but something invisible, hidden deep in this darkness. It was pulling me towards it, towards a space that I couldn't understand, but I felt it. That feeling, the desire for me to lose consciousness, to no longer have to face these fears. A soft sigh, as if someone was right behind me. I turned around, but saw only darkness. Nobody. There is nothing but this space, empty and haunted. I tried to breathe, tried to find a way to escape, but this darkness clung to me too tightly. It covers more than just the space around me. It covered my mind, like a virus, penetrating every thought and every feeling. I can't think anymore. Everything in my head started to get chaotic. Dark shadows, strange sounds, all seemed to be overlapping each other, twisting my mind. I felt like I was being sucked into an invisible whirlpool, a vortex with no bottom and no way out. That feeling of losing control rose, waves crashed into my mind, almost making me collapse. But then, I realized something strange. This darkness is not something outside of me. It is me. I couldn't realize it until now. That shadow, that gloomy feeling, is a part of my mind. The fears, worries, and obsessions that I have kept in my soul for so long. It is not just a force out there but an inseparable part of me. I stood there, looking into the darkness, looking at myself. There is no way out. There is no way to escape the dark parts of yourself. This darkness is not something I can fight or avoid. It's me. I am it. I turned around and looked at the plastic covering the window again. This time, I no longer feel scared. Those shadowy shapes no longer panicked me. I no longer see any threat from them. I see my own stillness and stillness in it. And then, I realized one more thing. That shadow, the darkness I had been running from for so long, was not something I needed to fight or escape from. It is a part of me. And now, I have learned to accept it. It is not the enemy. It is a part of me, an indispensable part. Every step I took across the concrete floor echoed like frantic tapping in my head, adding to the hysteria rising within me. I felt that darkness chasing me, not with a physical form, but with something invisible, like a force that couldn't be seen but could be clearly felt. The hallway stretched endlessly, the space around me seemed to become more and more limitless. Plastic window coverings are no longer simple shields. They are like invisible curtains, barriers between me and the outside world. The wind blew past, making strange noises, like mocking laughter, like creatures in the dark rejoicing that I couldn't escape. I was breathing rapidly, my legs were tired and I couldn't continue running anymore. The feeling of sweat drenching my body made me even more uncomfortable. I looked forward and noticed the elevator door was at the end of the hallway, a dim light emanating from it, like a salvation. I rushed towards it, knowing full well that every step I took could be my last. When I slammed my hand on the elevator button, the door slowly opened. I hurriedly rushed in and pressed the button for the lower floor. The elevator started moving down, but I couldn't calm down. The feeling of fear still haunts me, and I can't get it out of my head. I wondered if everything I had experienced was just hallucinations caused by stress. But the truth is that I can't help but feel that there is something truly haunting that space. The lighting in the elevator is weak, creating a small and stuffy space. I looked at my reflection in the elevator mirror. My face was pale, my eyes were blurry, as if I hadn't slept in days. My whole body seems to be exhausted. My heart was pounding, each beat like a wave ravaging my body. But just as I tried to calm myself, another noise rang out, this time from above me. A gentle but haunting noise, like something moving in space, above the elevator. I looked up, my eyes wide, as if I was waiting for something to fall, or for the darkness to pull me up and swallow me whole. The elevator continued to go down, but the air in it became thick. I felt that presence, still somewhere in the building, still watching me. That shadow, that mysterious haunting, cannot be dismissed. It has become a part of me. An inseparable part. Finally, the elevator stopped. The door opened, and I walked out, still in a state of utter confusion. The space outside the elevator is nothing strange. The building is empty, no one is here. But I don't feel comfortable at all. The feeling of not being able to escape still clings to me, like an invisible weight on my shoulders. Everything became silent. But it wasn't an ordinary silence. It was a haunting, dangerous silence. I stood for a moment, feeling the space around me. This building is not just a place. It's a trap I can't escape. The darkness still enveloped me, even after I left the 18th floor. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure: I would never escape this darkness. It's not a place I can hide from. It is a part of me. And now, I have become a part of it. I can't get out. Not because I didn't try, but because that darkness has become a part of me. It was no longer an out-of-this-world creature, not something I could fight or run from. That darkness has clung to my mind, into the deep corners of my head, taking over my thoughts and emotions. And I don't know what I'm running from anymore. I cannot separate it from myself. Every step I took, I felt the weight of that darkness. Every hallway, every room, all carry a layer of darkness like a cloak covering me, hiding everything, making me lose my way. The flashlight in my hand trembled. The flickering light was not strong enough to dispel that shadow. I looked into the darkness before me and realized something strange. I didn't see the threat in it anymore. I saw myself, mixed in there, as part of that shadow. I can't breathe. Not because I was lacking air, but because I couldn't escape those thoughts. Those images. Memories. The fears that I had hidden deep in my mind, now resurfaced, stronger than ever. The shadow is no longer something I can hide from. It's not a far-fetched nightmare. These are worries and pains that I don't want to face. It's the dark parts of myself. Part of me wanted to scream, to run away. But I know clearly, I can't. There's nowhere left to hide. There's no one left who can help me. This building, this shadow, it's not something outside of me anymore. It has become me. Light footsteps echoed in the quiet space, as if I was running after myself, running away from a part of myself that I couldn't deny. That feeling of fear and anxiety, I felt very clearly during my first days working here. But now, it's more than just a vague feeling. It was a real presence, an invisible force pulling me into a despair I couldn't escape. I no longer know what is real and what is virtual. The noises around me are no longer just meaningless sounds. They are calls, whispers. Run, but you won't escape. That whisper echoed in my head again, just like before. I cannot avoid it. My steps kept echoing, but each step became heavier. Each step pulled me deeper into the darkness. I started looking at the plastic panels, where darkness surrounded me. Faint shapes appeared on the plastic, not of the creatures out there, but of myself, the silhouettes of parts one had forgotten, parts one did not want to face. I realized that what I was seeing were not hallucinations. They are parts of me, parts one have ignored, dark parts of my soul that I have tried to keep hidden. This building, this darkness, is not a place I can escape from. I got myself into this trap. I can't run away anymore. And the truth is, I don't want to run away anymore. I can't escape myself. I was a part of this darkness, and it was an inseparable part of me. I stood there, in the dark space, looking into the darkness, looking at the moving images, the parts of me that I had refused to face. The shadows are no longer the enemy. They are me. And I can't get out. Every night, as I walked across the parking lot and along the chain-link fence, I couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right. I was used to the darkness surrounding abandoned cars and weak overhead lights, but tonight, this space had a different feel, as if there was something waiting for me, a presence I couldn't see but could clearly feel. The abandoned cars, the twisted metal shells, they all seemed lifeless, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something strange about them. Sometimes, when I stand near old cars, I feel as if they are watching me, as if they are waiting for something. I don't know how to explain that feeling, but it really made me feel uneasy. The light from the fluorescent lights overhead was dim, casting long, distorted shadows on the oily floor. Those dark shadows seemed to be moving, spinning around me, and I began to feel surrounded by this still, mysterious atmosphere. Every little noise, from the hiss of the air compressor to the strange noises coming from abandoned cars, echoed in my head like warnings. Then, a small noise rang out from the corner of the yard, where the damaged cars were parked. I looked at the security monitor, and saw a dim light flashing in that area, where there was no one. For the first time I thought that maybe it was just an illusion, or maybe it was light reflecting from the surrounding things. But when I looked again, the light was still there, and there was no sign of any vehicle nearby. I got up and went out to check. A cold feeling immediately enveloped me as I walked out of the office, and the space around me became even more hazy. Every step I took echoed on the concrete floor, and the soft hiss of the air compressor served as eerie background music, adding to the strangeness of this night. I walked through the yard, looking at the abandoned cars, but nothing had changed. Everything was still quiet, only a light wind blew rustling the withered leaves. But when I turned around and looked at the security screen again, the light was gone. The screen returned to normal, nothing unusual remained. I told myself that it was probably just a flicker of light from some reflective object. But the feeling of insecurity still did not leave me. There's something going on here, and I can't explain it. As I walked back into the office, I heard another small noise. This time, the sound was more like a whisper, as if someone was muttering from afar. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that it was just a hallucination, that loneliness had made me paranoid. But no, I felt something in the air, a presence I couldn't identify, but I knew it was there, lurking somewhere in the darkness. I turned back to the screen, and this time, I didn't see anything strange. But that feeling still stuck with me, as if I was being watched, as if something out there was waiting for me to make a mistake. With each passing second, this space seemed to become more cramped, as if something was encroaching on me from behind, from the darkness in the parking lot. I asked myself, am I starting to get paranoid? What I experienced on the 18th floor, the shadows, the strange noises, have now returned, haunting me in this dark night. This building, even though it's no longer where I work, is still a trap I can't escape from. Those memories still follow me, unable to be erased. And now, I have the feeling that the darkness is not just a part of this space, but a part of myself. These past nights, I couldn't stop thinking about those flashing lights. Strange, inexplicable lights kept appearing and disappearing in the darkness of the parking lot, in old cars, in lifeless objects. My mind was spinning, unable to distinguish what was real and what was virtual. This feeling, a vague but surging fear within me, cannot be dismissed, it follows me every step of the way. I checked the yard lights again, but they were still working normally. They couldn't explain those flashes of light, which appeared in the darkness without a clear origin. Even when I looked at the security screen, I couldn't understand what was going on. My eyes suddenly tensed as lights suddenly flashed again, this time from one of those old cars, the convertible I'd been avoiding looking at for so long. This time, the light was clearer, stronger, and I couldn't stop looking at it. I felt a chill run down my spine. The darkness inside me, which I had ignored, now rose strongly again, pulling me into an indescribable feeling of confusion. I don't know if I can control myself anymore, if I can escape this obsession. I stood up from my chair, almost spilling my coffee. My heart was pounding so hard I felt like it could break my ribs. I rushed out the door, hurried to the yard, feeling the cold night wind blowing across my face. The air was fresh, but there was a heavy feeling, as if every step I took made me feel more tense. Abandoned cars surrounded me like lifeless corpses, unable to erase the feeling that something was watching them. I continued walking into the parking lot, following the faint light I had just seen. A feeling of suffocation took over me, and I felt my limbs go numb. The flashlight in my hand trembled, but I continued to shine on the convertible, on the abandoned sedan, on its debris. Suddenly, the light from my flashlight shone inside the car. But there was nothing in there but debris, traces of time that had eaten away at it. Torn seat cushions, greasy upholstery, old debris, all look like traces of a place long abandoned. There's no one in there. There was no one to explain the strange thing I had just witnessed. But the inexplicable feeling remained. When I turned around, slamming the car door almost frantically, I felt as if I were locking something inside. But the strange thing is, I'm not sure if I'm locking something up or keeping something out. The feeling of tension and confusion increases day by day. I ran back into the main building, my pulse pounding, still feeling like I was being watched, even though I couldn't explain it rationally. When I told my boss indirectly about the strange lights I had seen, he just shrugged and suggested that they were probably reflections from cars passing by on the highway. But I couldn't stop feeling that something strange, an invisible presence, was haunting me. The following nights, I realized more and more that I couldn't escape it. Strange lights, strange noises, and the feeling of being watched from a force beyond my sight all continued to haunt me. It was inexplicable, but I knew that the presence was no coincidence. It is clinging to me, silently but hauntingly. Day after day, those flashing lights appeared again, suddenly and unpredictably. Every time I see them, my heart pounds in my chest, as if something is about to fall, as if something scary is very close. I tried not to think about them, but every night, as the darkness around me grew thicker, I couldn't stop thinking about it. That feeling, the feeling of being watched, as if someone was standing just outside my vision, just waiting for me to make a mistake, haunted me constantly. I couldn't escape that tension, couldn't stop feeling that presence. Even while working, even in the quietest moments, a strange feeling kept clinging to me, making it impossible for me to breathe. Every night, as I leave the office and walk through the parking lot, where abandoned cars gnaw at the night air, I can't help but feel an inexplicable fear. Those old cars were like corpses, nothing but desolation. But something in the air made me feel like they could still see me, like something was watching me from the shadows. One night, as I was standing near one of the convertibles, I suddenly felt someone near me. A cold feeling ran down my spine. It wasn't a gust of wind or a sudden noise. It was a feeling, a presence that I couldn't identify. I turned around, but there was no one. There is only darkness. With the flashlight in hand, I aimed the light at the convertible and at the other cars around me. There's nothing but piles of scrap, old tires. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but couldn't help but feel something watching me from the darkness. And then, once again, I saw a flash of light, just for a split second, from inside the car, enough to make my heart jump into my throat. That light was not from outside, but from inside the car. That feeling rose within me again. I can't stand anymore. My hands were shaking, my mind was spinning. I couldn't explain what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure, this darkness, this inexplicable presence, it was not a coincidence. With all the strength I had left, I rushed toward the main building, running through the parking lot, feeling each hurried step echo in the night. I didn't dare turn around, but I felt someone was watching me, just a small space away from me. When I re-entered the building, my heart was still pounding. Sweat drenched my forehead, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I told myself I was too stressed, too paranoid. But when I looked at the security screen, that light flashed again. I couldn't tell anyone what I felt, because I couldn't explain it. But I know, I can't escape something strange is happening here. After that night, my feelings of fear and paranoia only increased. Every flicker of light, every metallic sound, even the smallest, made my nerves tense. I wrote it all down. Every time I saw an unusual flash of light, I recorded its time and location in a small notebook. But there is no clear pattern. There is no indication that they came from a single source. They just appear randomly, and each time it's enough to make me gasp. Some nights, I even began to doubt my sanity. The cars, shadows, and strange sounds seemed to come back to disturb my mind. Every time I passed by the yard door, every time I looked at the abandoned cars, I felt like there was a presence watching me, as if I was being watched from a hidden corner, a place I couldn't see. On a particularly quiet night, as I sat in my office, tired and exhausted, I stared at the security screen, fighting sleep. Suddenly, a light flashed from the screen, a flash so bright it made the entire camera feed turn white, and then it flashed again a few times, bright enough to make my heart pound in my chest. I woke up with a start, feeling adrenaline flowing through my body like an electric current. My vision became blurry, my heart was pounding and I couldn't breathe. My eyes widened, I stared at the screen, waiting for an explanation. As the brightness gradually decreased, the sedans began to appear in the screen again, but one detail had changed. One of the cars, the sedan specifically, has changed. The trunk is open. I'm sure that trunk was never opened before. Fear began to overwhelm me. I stood up quickly, threw the chair aside, and ran out. My flashlight shook in my hand as I walked out of the office, toward the yard. I didn't know what I was looking for, but the feeling that something was wrong, the feeling that I couldn't shake, was too strong. I couldn't help but look at the cars. Those cars are not lifeless corpses anymore. They are part of something bigger, something I cannot explain. As I approached the sedan, I realized that the trunk was actually open, and that made me feel even more uneasy. I shined my flashlight inside, but there was nothing special inside, other than a pile of debris. I felt a lump in my throat. A wave of discomfort washed over me, making me feel like I was facing something inexplicable. I turned around and slammed the trunk shut, as if I were locking something inside. I quickly returned to the main building, feeling my pulse still pounding in my chest, but unable to utter a word. No one can understand this feeling, no one can know what is happening to me. I can't explain this uneasiness, but I feel that I can't bear it any longer. The next day, I told a colleague about what I had seen. He shook his head and told me not to worry too much, saying it could be an electrical problem in the car. One of the older cars had an electrical problem that could cause the headlights to flash unexpectedly. He said that could be the reason I was seeing the light, but I couldn't convince myself that it was just an electrical problem. Those beams of light were not like headlights, and they appeared from many different points, not just one. I started to feel paranoid. Those strange lights continued to flicker in the night, and metallic sounds also began to become a part of every night. I cannot drive them away. Every time I passed the yard door, every time I looked at the abandoned cars, I felt something inexplicable was watching me. An invisible presence that I cannot deny. And then, the night I thought would break me, when I couldn't take it anymore, it happened. Just after 2 a.m., as I dozed off in my office, lulled by the constant hum of the overhead lights, the security screen showed another flash of intense light. Once again, I woke up startled, and this time, I couldn't ignore it. I knew something was very wrong. I can't continue like this. The feeling of fear was weighing on me more and more, and I felt like I was about to collapse because of it. My legs felt heavy as I entered the yard, my flashlight shaking in my hand. Debris scattered under my feet, and the sound of gravel crunching like a constant rhythm echoed in my head. The night air was thick, carrying the smell of old gasoline and oil, making me feel like I was entering a world with no exit. As I approached the sedan with the trunk open, I tried to breathe evenly, reassuring myself that nothing would happen, but I couldn't help but feel something invisible hovering around me. The trunk was open as if someone had forcefully opened it, and when I shined a light inside, I saw nothing of note. There were only scraps, a spare tire, a few pieces of broken plastic and a thin layer of dust. But I felt an overwhelming fear, beyond rational explanation, as if something was waiting in the dark, right near me. The cold temperature made me shiver. My lips were dry and my teeth chattered as I stepped back. And then, a small sound, like a wrench hitting the ground, sounded behind me. I was startled, almost dropping the flashlight from my hand. I turned around, illuminating my surroundings in a panic, but there was no one. Just an old truck, rusty, with a broken hood. The sound of that wrench still rings in my ears. Something strange, as if it was created to scare me, warn me, or make me lose control. I couldn't stand there any longer. My heart pounded loudly in my chest, my legs seemed to no longer have the strength to stand. I turned around and ran towards the garage, closing the door behind me. That feeling, the inexplicable feeling of being watched, stuck with me. I stood against the wall in the garage, breathing heavily, trying to regain my composure. My pulse was pounding in my chest, and I felt like my body was no longer my own. I wonder if any of this is real, or if I'm losing my mind from isolation and boredom. But that wrench, that open trunk, those were real signs, undeniable signs. I wasn't just imagining those lights and sounds. I have seen them. I spent the night checking the security monitors and trying to keep everything under control. Every faint mechanical noise, every shiver as I peered into dark corners, every flicker of dim light made me feel as if I were swimming in my own fear. I can't relax. Every time I look in the window, at my own reflection, I can't believe that it's me. I looked like a cornered animal, my eyes wild and tired. Then that night, around 3 a.m., as I was dozing in my office chair, I saw a flash of light from the screen. It wasn't just a flash of light. It was so bright it made the entire camera feed turn white. I woke up with a start, my heart pounding so hard I felt as if it would break my ribs. I stared at the screen, eyes wide, trying to understand what was happening. As the brightness gradually decreased, I noticed a detail. The trunk of the sedan I checked earlier was open. I'm sure that trunk wasn't open when I just checked. It wasn't an illusion. This is really happening. The spiraling light slithered between the two cars, weak rays of light flashing in the dark night, then disappearing as it slithered around a corner. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. A small scream escaped my mouth, but it wasn't a strong warning, more like a plea. Praying that something in the dark wouldn't chase me, wouldn't hurt me. Sweat dripped down my forehead, my mouth was dry. The confusion cannot be stopped. Every muscle in my body felt frozen. I felt my instinct screaming, "Run!" But instead of running, I walked step by step towards the cars, where I had seen the flash of light before. The feeling of terror and fear remained inexplicable, but I continued to move forward, my hands shaking so much that I almost dropped the flashlight. Beams of light flashed through the fenders, illuminating broken glass, creating a claustrophobic, quiet space. I tried to breathe, but the fresh air made me feel suffocated. Suddenly, a gentle metallic sound rang out from nearby. The sound of the wrench falling to the ground was so deafening that I almost dropped the flashlight. I turned around, shining my flashlight into the space, but there was no one. Just an old truck, rusted and standing quietly in the dark. That noise echoed in the silent space, making me feel like something was lurking in the darkness. At this point, I couldn't stand anymore. The feeling of fear hit me so strongly that I turned around and ran quickly towards the garage, slamming the door behind me. It felt like I couldn't breathe, my heart was pounding in my chest. I leaned against the wall, sweat still drenched on my forehead, and my breathing was rapid. In that moment, I wondered if everything I saw was real or if I was losing my mind from boredom and loneliness. The feeling of fear that I cannot dispel still haunts me. Even though I tried to rationalize everything, to find a reasonable explanation for all those strange lights and unusual sounds, part of me couldn't help but feel that something was really wrong. I still can't explain the flashing lights and unknown noises. Everything seemed to be out of my control. A week later, I went back to the store again. This time, I was determined not to let my imagination run wild. I recorded everything that happened, hoping to find some pattern that could explain the strange things. And then, one night, when I saw the flashing light from the security monitor, I decided to go out and face it. As I approached the fence, I heard a small, almost inaudible metallic sound. My heart sped up, but I told myself to keep going. I went to where the light was coming from. It was faint, like a weak light coming from behind dented steel doors. I got closer, my stomach churned, sweat poured down. But as I got closer, the light began to fade, and I found nothing but darkness. A strange feeling passed through me, as if someone was behind me. I turned around, preparing to face the intruder, but instead of a person, I only saw a faint shadow standing there. I couldn't see clearly, but I felt the presence. It stood there, quietly, as if waiting for me to turn my back. I don't dare move on. My heart was beating like crazy, and I turned around and ran quickly toward the garage. This time, I can't continue to hide. That shadow, that presence, it followed me, clung to me, and I couldn't escape. Not because I don't want to, but because I no longer have the ability to escape it. I can't stop. That night, I tried again to make sense of everything. Strange footsteps, the feeling like someone is standing right behind you, can't be ignored. I felt that no matter what I did, that presence, that invisible darkness, was still chasing me. No matter whether I ran or turned back, I still couldn't escape the feeling of being watched, as if my every move was being stared at. The attic door, with its rusty lock, once again occupied my every thought. It was something completely different, a presence I couldn't explain. I can imagine every detail of it, how it stands there, like an invisible wall blocking me from moving forward. And even though I tried to reassure myself, it continued to haunt me. One night, I decided to face it. I tried to stay calm, but the fear still couldn't be dispelled. Every step I take up the stairs, every time I touch the railing, my body tenses. My steps were no longer steady, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The air around me seemed to become heavy, as if something was squeezing my heart. I looked at the attic door, and this time, I could hear strange sounds. They are not normal building noises. No, it was the sound of something beyond my control, as if there was something waiting for me, lurking behind that door. When I opened the door, a wave of cold hit my face, and I could feel the presence, almost see it in the darkness. As the light from my flashlight shone through the door, I saw pitch-black darkness inside. Even though I didn't see anyone, I sensed that something was there, in the darkness, waiting for me. I turned around, but couldn't move. That feeling, the feeling of being watched, has become a part of me. Suddenly, I heard a slight noise from behind. I turned around, but saw only darkness. No one. But the feeling remains unchanged. It is there, invisible but always present. Leaving all reason behind, I rushed towards the back door, feeling like the entire building was bearing its weight on me. I can't get out. I can't go back. Every time I turned around to look into the darkness, I felt something lurking, preparing to pounce on me. When I went outside, the night sky was hazy, there was no light from the city, and I couldn't see my surroundings clearly. My steps staggered on the ground, my body was so tired that I could barely move. Even though I was outside, I still felt that presence clinging to me. The feeling of being watched still cannot go away. Suddenly, I felt a vibration under my feet, like the whole building was swaying, as if it wasn't an ordinary place but something alive, something waking up. I turned back to look at the door, and I couldn't express that feeling. It was the feeling that there was someone standing behind the door. If I just turned around I would see it, but I didn't dare. I can't stay any longer. Even though I tried to reason everything out, I couldn't convince myself that everything I felt was an illusion. That presence is not an illusion. It has become a part of me, and I can't escape. Even though I was exhausted, everything around me continued to haunt me. Shadows, strange sounds, and inexplicable changes in the space around me made my thoughts spin. I couldn't escape the feeling that someone was watching me, that something invisible was waiting for me in places I couldn't control. One day, after an empty morning, I decided I would definitely leave. Even though I cleared everything up with the building's owner and submitted my resignation, I still couldn't shake the feeling that something in the attic was still waiting for me. I can't explain why I still feel drawn to it, to those strange details that I can't quite put my finger on. Something in there wanted to open, but I didn't know what it meant. A feeling of fear began to take root in my mind, leaving me unable to do anything but think about the attic, about the rusty door, and about the suffocating air around it. Every time I think about it, my heart beats hard. Each beat makes me feel like something in my body is being tightened. One night, while I was doing my duty at the cultural center, I felt a change. This strange feeling has stuck with me since entering. The painting I saw last time, a portrait covered by a protective cloth, now had a strange change. Something indescribable had changed. I can't explain it, but I know that the picture has been mixed up. The cover had been pulled back, revealing almost half of the painting. My heart tightened. It felt like a cold wind hit me, making it almost impossible to breathe. The next morning, I reported the incident to the center coordinator. I kept my voice calm, trying not to show my anxiety, but deep down I sensed that something was wrong. I'm just saying that maybe a guest or employee accidentally touched the cloth and couldn't put it back in the right place. But after I left, I couldn't stop thinking about the painting being disturbed again, and that strange feeling was inexplicable. The following days, I began to sense a strange pattern. Every time I patrol the conservation rooms, I hear strange sounds, like light breathing, small, almost inaudible squeaks. Especially when I looked at that painting, I felt an invisible presence lurking in the darkness around it. My instinct signaled that I was faced with something strange, but I couldn't explain it. One night, as I walked through the hallway, my tension rose again. I looked at the picture, wondering if I was imagining something. I tried to ignore all that, but my instincts insisted that something had changed in that picture. As I stepped closer, I felt a blast of cold air from behind, and I blinked again, trying to regain my composure. But in that moment, I felt a movement behind me, a light step, as if someone was approaching. I turned around, but didn't see anyone. Everything remained quiet. However, a strange feeling, as if being watched, continued to haunt me. I can't get over that feeling. Light footsteps and strange sounds like that, day after day, cling to me. I couldn't escape the feeling that something invisible but very clear, was watching me. Once again, I walked through the hallway of the dormitory, where the stuffy air and the heavy smell of dust and disinfectant made me feel like I was walking through a forgotten space. The overhead lights flickered continuously. Every time I walked, the light flickered on and off as if to remind me that something was wrong. Nothing seemed unusual, just pale walls and closed doors. But within me, there was a subtle shift in the air, as if something had changed. I felt a slight chill run down my spine, and as I looked toward the end of the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. That feeling is inexplicable, but it is clear, like a shadow in the corner of my vision. It seemed like every time I looked back, that shadow got closer, as if it was waiting for me to turn my back and rush towards me. I tried to dispel that feeling, telling myself it was just fatigue. But I can't forget the image of the painting in the cultural center. It is a portrait, a harsh image of a person, but it has a strange power. When I stood before it, I felt something inexplicable, as if the painting was looking at me, waiting for me. And then, one night, when I returned, I discovered that the protective cloth had been tampered with again. My heart sank. Even though I tried to tell myself that there was nothing unusual, that feeling couldn't go away. The picture has been disturbed again, just like last time. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure: there was something in there, in that room, in that painting, waiting for me. The flashlight in my hand trembled as I stepped closer. Not only was the painting disturbed, it also had a strange change in the color, in the way the light fell on it. I could feel its presence, as if the painting was alive, watching me. As I stepped closer, I felt a rush of cold air, and in that moment, I heard a soft sigh, a low groan from behind me. At that time, I couldn't move. My whole body felt frozen, I couldn't breathe. I turned around, but no one was there. But the feeling of something standing near me, is indescribable. I quickly turned around, walked out of the room, quickly locking the door behind me. I couldn't explain what happened, but part of me knew that the painting was no ordinary work of art. It was something else, an inexplicable presence. And the feeling I felt when I stood before it, when I heard that breathing sound, was not an illusion. It's real. Even when exhausted, I still feel the change in the space around me. This feeling is inexplicable, but it is always there, as if something in this building is watching me. Every night, I walked through the deserted hallways, feeling the oppressive silence and the lengthening darkness, as if it were filling every corner, obscuring all light. Even though my job was simple, just checking the doors and windows and taking note of any abnormalities, I couldn't escape the strange feeling this building gave off. Lights turned on automatically in the hallways, even though I was sure no one was passing by, and the emergency exit sign flashed with a faint glow as I approached. Strange sounds, soft clanking sounds from behind closed doors made my heartbeat speed up. I pressed my ear against the wooden door, but only heard my breathing, slow and methodical. This strange feeling makes me uneasy. Every time I entered an empty room, the cold and still space seemed to surround me, with no sign of life other than myself. I could feel the silence, but there was something in the air that made me feel like someone was standing there, just a few feet away. This made it impossible for me to relax, even though I tried to convince myself that it was all just an electrical system problem or my own fatigue. However, the strange things continue to increase. One night, when I went to check the hallways, I discovered that the light at the end of the hallway turned on by itself even though I hadn't passed through that area. This speeds up my heart rate. I gingerly stepped forward, hoping to find a student or an intruder, but there was none. There was only silence and darkness. When I looked at the door, I couldn't help but feel that an invisible presence was standing inside, looking at me, watching me. I told myself that this could be a coincidence. It could be a problem with the sensor, or it could be that an animal has found its way into the building. But no matter what, that feeling still cannot go away. Part of me felt that I wasn't alone in these hallways, as if someone was following me, looking at me from behind. The next day, I talked to the supervisor about these strange phenomena. He sounded calm and not worried, just asking me to check the sensor system and maybe reset the circuit breaker. He thought I might be overreacting, and this made me feel a bit uncomfortable. Anyway, I decided to do as he said and test the system the next evening. When I reached the hallway known to have sensors, I started to feel uneasy. My flashlight shined on the closed doors, and as I crossed the threshold, I felt a change in the air. That feeling makes me unable to stop worrying. I walked through a row of identical doors, all closed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking in the darkness. The more I tried to understand these phenomena better, the more my sense of fear grew. Strange noises, automatic lights, and especially the strange silence of the building made me feel uneasy. That feeling, the feeling of being watched, remains inexplicable. No matter how I explained it, I still felt that there was something invisible, a presence waiting for me. The walls around me had some chipped paint, everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't welcome here. My mouth was dry, and my heartbeat was pounding in my ears. I forced myself to calm down, but the fear still did not leave me. I walked in the darkness, determined to find the cause of the strange phenomena that were happening. I wanted to stay a bit, check to see if the lights would randomly turn on, so I turned off all the lights with the main switch and stood quietly in the dark. I felt a thick silence envelop me, broken only by the faint hum of the emergency lights. Sweat began to fall from my forehead, and I could feel the wetness running down the sides of my face. My eyes began to itch as I searched for any small noise, and then, out of nowhere, I heard something that sounded like a distant sigh. That breathing sound was very short and gentle, but it cut through the silence like a knife, startling me. I turned around and shined my flashlight into every corner of the room, checking all the closed doors. but there was no one there. I muttered to myself that it was just the sound of the wind or maybe a strange current of air, but the truth was I couldn't get the sound out of my mind. Just before I decided to walk away, the lights flickered again. I was so startled that the flashlight fell out of my hand and onto the floor. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. Light from above illuminates the empty hallway, creating a mercilessly claustrophobic feeling. But I saw no one, no movement, no sign of an intruder. I took a deep breath, trying to dispel the feeling of fear, but part of me knew that something wasn't right. I'm dealing with a phenomenon beyond circuit malfunction. Day by day, I feel more and more desperate to find a reasonable explanation. These strange phenomena are increasing day by day. I tried checking the doors, only to find them still locked, and every time I turned around, there were sometimes louder noises from behind, like someone was following me. I hear footsteps, sometimes right around the next corner. My pulse was tense, my body ready to run, but my mouth was dry, and my lungs tightened, making it hard to breathe. One night I decided to bring a handheld camera, even though it's not part of my standard equipment. I thought maybe I could record what was happening, to see if my mind was playing tricks on me. Then I reviewed the video I had recorded. Low light from the campus cast long, wavering shadows down the narrow hallways, making everything look distorted through the camera lens. Every time I heard a faint sound, I felt my throat tighten. As I turned my camera through the glass door of the student lounge, I felt a strange difference. The room is spacious with large windows overlooking the courtyard, which is normal during the day, but at night, it looks scary. I scanned the window with my camera and saw there was no furniture inside, just empty walls. But then I thought I saw a silhouette flitting across the far side of the room. I focused on the viewfinder, and when I looked back, I saw only the outline of the walls. I can't explain the feeling, and when I review the footage, the camera only shows a blur in the corner. Maybe it was just dust in the lens or the low light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking, just beyond my vision. That feeling of fear, that maybe my imagination had escalated to the point where I was creating ghosts out of thin air, made it impossible for me to escape the tension. By the third week, I felt like my nerves were unbearably tense. My nights had become an exhausting routine, walking down the hallways with my heart pounding, opening doors to check the emptiness, hearing faint sighs from empty hallways. I felt like an animal being hunted in a maze, not knowing what might lie in wait for me. I slept fitfully during the day, beset by nightmares of faceless figures waiting behind every locked door. One day, I contacted a colleague by phone and explained that something was wrong with the building. But he just laughed and told me not to worry too much, that maybe I was tired. I couldn't convince him to understand how I felt. Regardless, I knew that something inexplicable was lurking in the shadows of this building. I heard a strange noise, and then the lights came on randomly, as if controlled by an invisible hand. That feeling surprised me, I couldn't explain it. My supervisor, over the phone, suggested I submit an official report and request an inspection. I hung up, half convinced I was going crazy, but also clinging to the last bit of hope that an inspection would reveal a simple glitch in the system. When maintenance crews arrived during the day, they found no evidence of an electrical problem. They checked the hallway, sensors and switches, and concluded that everything was working properly. Part of me felt relieved that I didn't have to deal with a potential wiring error. But another part of me sank deeper into the feeling of unease, because if the building was still operating normally, then what the hell was I experiencing that night? Even though I tried to convince myself that it was all just a temporary hiccup, I couldn't shake the feeling. Part of me remained wary, feeling that something was going on that I couldn't understand. I continued working, but things were no longer the same. From that moment on, I became easily scared. Every little noise, every flashing light made my body tense. One night, as I was nearing the end of my shift, I noticed a set of lights come on in the far corner of the basement hallway, a place I wouldn't normally venture to. My body tensed, my hand clutching the flashlight so tightly that my knuckles ached. I walked slowly, each step echoing on the cold concrete walls. The air down there was colder, and my breathing became intermittent with every step. My heartbeat quickened, and a shiver ran down my spine as I approached the hallway light. All the silence was broken by a faint sound, like a long breath exhaled from behind a storage room door. My skin got goosebumps. My mind screamed at me to turn around and run, but I couldn't ignore the sound. I searched for the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest, clearly feeling the tension in every nerve. When I opened the door, the room was an empty space, with no furniture, just four cold walls. The musty smell filled my nose, the air felt like it had been trapped for decades. As I shined the flashlight into each corner of the room, I heard another breath, almost touching my ears. I turned around, but there was no one. My mind raced, and a wave of panic hit me. Every muscle in my body tensed, my vision blurred slightly, and a cold sweat rushed over my body. My breathing was so rapid that I felt like I couldn't get enough air into my lungs. I know I have to run, but I can't. I forced myself to check the doors and locks again. The tension in my body couldn't go away. I hurriedly checked the warehouse and turned off the lights, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I couldn't explain what was happening, but I knew I wasn't alone in this building. As I climbed the stairs, my heart was still pounding. As I neared the main gate, the first light of morning filtered through the glass doors, and for the first time in hours I felt a little calm. But it didn't last long. That feeling, the feeling of being watched, still sticks with me. When I finished my shift and drove home, I felt exhausted, but my mind was still reeling from the night's events. The conflicting thoughts inside me made me unable to feel at ease. When I arrived home, I felt a strange uneasiness, as if something had followed me home. But there were no strange phenomena, no flashing lights, no strange noises. There was only the ticking of the kitchen clock and the distant sounds of the city. However, I couldn't shake that feeling. The next day, when I returned to work, I was determined to face whatever was happening. I called out, not with fear, but with a strange determination to break the silence. I asked if anyone was there, if anyone needed help. But my voice was swallowed by emptiness. There was only silence in response. The overhead lights remained off at my pace, echoing blankly, as if something were controlling the light that I couldn't see. This feeling, an invisible presence, always followed me, making me feel even more insecure. I stopped, feeling a rush of air past my ears. My heart beat like thunder, my skin tingled from the cold, but I stood firm. My mouth was dry as I forced myself to speak, but my voice was shaking, unable to form a direct answer. There was only the oppressive silence of empty rooms and tightly closed windows. The hallway light dimmed, and I realized that every time no light turned on without warning, no door opened. These phenomena, as if they had formed an uneasy truce in my head. I finished the turn without any more incidents, but the tension still didn't go away. It calmed down just a little, as if someone invisible had withdrawn as the sun rose. I walked out of the complex with a surreal feeling, as if I had reached an impasse with something I could neither see nor truly understand. I can't say I feel safe. My pulse was still pounding, the slightest sound in every darkness made me flinch. But I feel like I've regained some control. Perhaps the acknowledgement of whatever lurks in the hallway has kept it in the background so far. But I still don't know what haunts the empty dorms at night. Even though I continued walking around the block, the random lights and sizes decreased, sometimes they didn't disappear completely. At the very edge of my hearing, I would catch a fleeting exhale behind a locked door. I would walk forward, flashlight in hand, heart racing, only to find an empty, motionless room. I realized that these encounters could never be explained into a clear explanation. There is a weight in those hallways, an invisible presence that defies all rational understanding. It was still there, lurking in the silence of the stuffy atmosphere and the flickering lights. I've learned to live with uncertainty, even though it leaves a permanent knot in my stomach every time I walk down those hallways. I felt a slight chill, as if the building was watching me, reminding me that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. I still can't explain what happened. Was it something supernatural, or just the echoes of my own frayed nerves? But in the empty space, where door locks clicked and lights flickered for no apparent reason, I felt an invisible intelligence sending a pulse of fear through my veins, making me keep glancing over my shoulder and feeling the uneasiness following me, even in the quiet of a new morning. Then, on a stormy Tuesday night, I set foot in the hospital annex for the first time, where the flickering hallway lights seemed to hum more with fear than with electricity. The air was unbearably still, as if it carried the echoes of forgotten footsteps that never found their way out. A feeling of something wrong began to overwhelm me. The cold, cement walls seemed to be whispering secrets that they wished I couldn't hear. I tried to brush that feeling away, telling myself it was just exhaustion after a long day, but in my chest, the feeling of insecurity never faded. It lingered there, its beat like a second heartbeat, warning me that there was something lurking in the darkness, far beyond my understanding. The sickly yellow light from the dim fluorescent lights shined on the chipped walls and peeling paint. There were times when I noticed the lights remotely powering themselves on, responding to motion sensors that shouldn't have been activated unless someone was walking underneath, but there was no one else there. At least no one that I could see. Every time I ventured down the steps of the basement hallway, my heartbeat pounded in my ears and cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I was starting to dread even the thought of going down there, but work required me to get tested. A room at the end of the hallway began to attract my attention. Its door was sealed with a thick padlock and a chain that looked older than the building. On the metal plate near the door handle, there were some scratches and marring, but I could still read part of the hospital's name and an indeterminate date, possibly the date when the space was last used. However, officially no records of this room exist. When I casually mentioned it to an executive, the response was always empty confusion. Some people say they don't know anything about a closed room. Others guessed that it was closed for administrative reasons years ago, but no one could give me a straight answer. As the weeks passed, I found myself returning there more often. My job rarely requires me to be in an extra room, but every time I pass by that room, I feel compelled to check. The flickering lights of the hallway caught my attention. I stood at the top of the concrete steps, watching as sensors detected movement below. The lights flickered one by one as if some invisible figure was walking down the length of the hallway, stopping at the end of the door. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I crept down quietly enough, I'd catch a glimpse of a figure that disappeared as soon as I tried to focus on it. One night, I was asked to investigate an electrical fault near the basement storage area. It was past midnight, and the hospital hallway above was almost silent, except for the distant beeping of some surveillance machine. I quickly finished the repair work, but instead of returning to the main floor, I found myself inexplicably going further down to the secondary floor. My heart beat faster with every step until I reached the bottom of the basement. I could barely breathe. It felt as if the walls were inching closer, pressing down on me, suffocating me in the oppressive air. Standing in the subfloor hallway, I noticed the light above me was dimmer than usual, flashing in rhythm as if matching my pulse. My palms were sweaty, and I wiped them on my coveralls. Every little sound, a drop of water from a leaking pipe, the hiss of air through an invisible vent, startled me. I felt like I wasn't alone, but when I turned around, there was no one in sight. Then, came the moment that almost stopped my heart. From behind the sealed door, I heard the faint sound of a light switch turning on. The hallway light above the door lit up, as if something inside that forbidden room had activated it. The rational side of my mind screamed that it couldn't be, since the door was locked with a rusty chain and a thick, sturdy padlock. I checked it before entering, even yanking hard to see if anything was wrong, but the door didn't budge. My first instinct was to turn around and leave, convincing myself that I couldn't hear anything and that it was just a fault with the wiring. However, curiosity and a growing sense of fear pushed me forward. Every step felt heavier, my knees were shaking and my mouth was so dry it was hard to swallow. I felt a primal fear, like an ancient alarm bell in my brain, telling me that I had made a grave mistake in approaching the door. At first, I pressed my ear against the cold metal surface of the door, only able to hear the pounding of my heart and my uneven breathing. Then, so faintly that I almost missed it, I detected a slow clicking sound from inside, as if something was being dragged across the concrete floor. The horror stories I had heard suddenly echoed in my head. Feeling overwhelmed with fear, my body tensed up with the fight or flight response. But I can't move. I ran, but instead I found myself trying the lock again, searching in my pocket for a tool to loosen the taut chain. The lock was still intact, but I kept imagining a presence on the other side, flipping a switch, waiting for me to take another step. A wave of nauseating fear washed over me, and my vision momentarily blurred. I felt my legs shaking and the cold sweat on my forehead turned cold. I backed away, almost staggering, back down the hallway. My breathing was erratic, barely getting enough air. I forced myself to climb the stairs, twice, once and then rushed to the main floor where a security guard was standing next to the elevator door. I blurted out something about needing to check the fuse box, but he just nodded absent-mindedly and didn't ask any questions. I'm very grateful for that. I don't want to explain the fear that gripped me or describe the inexplicable sounds and flashing lights. I just need to leave that door. Over the next few days, my sleep became erratic. Every time I close my eyes, I see that dark hallway. I replayed those sounds in my head, convinced that there was something in that room that was not only unusual but also terribly wrong. My coworkers comment that I seem restless when someone asks me if I feel tired. I waved my hand away, not daring to recount my experience because they would surely think I was losing control. But in quiet moments, I consider the possibility that perhaps I really am imagining things. Stress can cause hallucinations, right? Perhaps faulty wiring caused the lights to behave oddly, and I mistook the normal mechanical noise for something sinister. But the hallway's motion sensors continue to confuse me. I looked at their specs and discovered that they are standard infrared detectors that activate if any heat source passes through. However, when I scanned the security footage, I found no moving images. The camera just records the hallway lighting up without explanation. The staff almost considered it a glitch, but I couldn't. I need answers. Late one night, I determined to go back to record the phenomenon. I grabbed my flashlight, my toolkit, and my phone to record any evidence. My heart was pounding during the elevator ride down. The basement hallway was silent as usual, but as I approached the side stairs, the overhead lights flickered again, making me feel watched, wrapped in a shroud-like feeling. It was as if someone, or something, was standing at the end of the hallway out of my sight. I started filming with my phone, narrating in a shaky voice about the motion sensor and the locked door. My breathing became labored and I felt sweat trickling down my temples. One step at a time, I moved forward, shining my flashlight forward, half expecting to see a figure rushing away. The hallway stretched out before me, dimly lit at times by flickering fluorescent lights. As I got closer to the door, the flashlight beam hit the lock, which sparkled as if it had been polished since I was last there. My stomach turned when I realized that the lock looked newer, the rust replaced by shiny metal. I tried to control my shaking hands as I reached for the chain. My fingertips felt cold, and I heard my own ragged breathing echoing in the cramped room. Suddenly, my flashlight sizzled, and the hallway light went out, plunging everything into darkness. I let out a breath. My heart was pounding so violently that I felt it was about to burst out of my chest. The only light came from the dim glow of my phone. Then I heard the faint click again, like a switch being turned on. Every muscle in my body was tense. I forced myself to turn on the flashlight, and when I turned it on, the overhead lights flickered to life again. In that disorienting moment of flickering fluorescent light, I swear I caught a glimpse of a figure. At the end of the hallway. A shadow with no distinguishing features, just standing there, then disappeared as soon as the light stabilized, leaving me alone in the oppressive atmosphere. My knees weakened and a rush of terror shot through me. My vision was spinning, and for a moment I worried I was going to collapse right there. I leaned against the wall, sucking in ragged gulps of air. Every survival instinct told me to leave, but a stubborn part of my mind wanted some tangible proof that I wasn't imagining all of this. I aimed my phone down the hallway, zooming in on where I thought I saw the shape, but there was nothing but old walls and distant darkness. Unable to bear it anymore, I went back upstairs. But as I ascended, I felt an inexplicable urge to look over my shoulder one last time. That's when I realized it. The door at the other end was still locked, but light was seeping out from under the threshold, a faint band of pale light pulsing as if something inside was controlling it. I couldn't leave, even though my reason spoke. Reaching the ground floor, I tried to control my breathing, feeling shaky, sweaty and extremely confused. I made a half-hearted attempt to report the electrical anomaly to the night supervisor, but my words were slurred, and I think my haunted expression spoke volumes. He asked me if I needed to leave early and rest, and I nodded, unable to come up with a coherent excuse. That night, I could hardly sleep. The sight of the locked door, the mysterious light beneath it, and the shadow in the hallway made me doubt my own sanity. Maybe I also worked too many nights, having stayed the longest in a building that was older than most of the staff, but deep down, I felt something residing in that closed room, something that defied logic and official records. Despite my fear, a twisted curiosity gnawed at me. I wanted to break the lock, open the door, and face the unimaginable. But every time I thought about it, my chest tightened, and I was finally overwhelmed by the most primal terror. It felt as if I was trying to avoid an invisible monster, but also intentionally ignoring the feeling of a motion sensor light on the security screen as I walked out of the building on my last day. I hastily refused to glance back at the screens, but I couldn't decide if I actually escaped whatever was lurking behind that door, or if I was simply running out of my mind. I still wake up at odd hours, and can hear a switch clicking somewhere in my darkness. A mind tormented by all the unknown. I knew that the next time those lights turned on by themselves, I wouldn't be there to check, and that thought still told me nothing. Something was left in that closed room, locked for how long? Every now and then, I can't help but recall what appeared from the first moment I set foot on that decaying farm. I felt a disturbing tension in my chest, like a hostility to the dirt and a faint chemical smell hitting my temples. Even before the surveillance began, I knew there was something wrong with this place. I remember how it all started with a phone call from an acquaintance who insisted on having money to be carried out on a deserted farm. I was skeptical, imagining bored teenagers wandering through an abandoned place for cheap thrills, still in need of cash. On my first evening, the caretaker, a tired man with tired eyes, walked through the house pointing out the main rooms and saying he couldn't discuss details. He just told me if I heard anything or noticed any trespassers, I should call him right away. When I pressed for more specific details, he didn't scare me but told me not to worry. Day 1, there were no dramatic warnings or formal instructions, just a precise, marketable suit that they were truly transparent about. Every piece of wood, floor table, or window frame appears with age, giving off a musty smell that clings to my nostrils. The sounds beneath my feet echoed louder, and the narrow windows provided a distorted view of the forgotten fields in the distance. I could see the silhouette of the old barn heavily guarded, with chains where no one had set foot inside. At that moment, I was devastated when I turned on the single light in the living room, and the electricity came back from the generator. But I know I can't run too much light at once without risking losing the light. Bright yellow shines on the furniture, but my eyes begin to play tricks on me. I thought I saw shapes, trying to rationalize the howling winds of the night, but strangely for once, the air completely changed, as if a giant hand had blotted out all the wind. Old houses may expand and contract with temperature changes, but this is too rhythmic, too purposeful to be a random interpretation of the structure. I was getting harder and harder, and I could feel my pulse behind my ears. I thought about calling the caregiver, but I stopped at the light in the distance. An old mirror hanging on the wall reflected a distorted version of my slim figure, shining in the night. I don't know if I attracted it to my imagination or if it was just a mysterious house, but the next night, everything happened exactly as before. At about midnight, the wind suddenly stopped, a strange silence woke me, and like before, I heard slow footsteps. Nothing surprising, just something that kept me awake and worried. But when I meet anyone, their calm reactions only make my anxiety worse. The next week, when I returned to the house, I found myself bathed in sweat, my heart convinced that I had lost my mind or had been deceived by someone who knew better than I knew my assets. Even though my change was overnight, I saw nothing when I walked on the floor. Gradually, I began to doubt my senses and wonder if the oppressive silence of the farmland had warped my perceptions. The caregiver will check in from time to time, but his tone still cannot be neutralized. His only advice is to keep an eye out for any intruders and call him when needed. I couldn't believe the entire world took a collective breath and held it, my skin pricking me. I almost dropped the flashlight, that feeling, it was as if I was holding the moment in the dead wind. I felt a presence behind me, whipping into the living room, but nothing. The old man's clock in the corner ominously marked the top of the stairs. A dark figure with no details, just a vague human being floated by, landed and disappeared. My heart thundered, and I had to take a few quick breaths. That sound defies logical explanation, it all feels intentionally coordinated. I started noticing discoloration on one of the walls upstairs, almost like a fingerprint, but it faded whenever I tried to examine it closely. Even though my fear remained, I felt compelled to prove that I could handle the job, or perhaps I just wanted to solve the puzzle. A part of me was determined not to let a rickety house and some darkness break my resolve. Each passing night causes tension. I wondered why things always disappeared near the barn, if everything was locked up tight. Determined to face whatever was haunting my nights, I ventured out around midnight, when only the brightest sky provided my dim glow. I completely scanned the walls. A broken window high up near the rafts caught my attention. It was so small that a normal person could climb over it easily, but shards of glass and rotting wooden frames suggested it could have been tampered with. The sudden stinging sensation on the back of my neck made me feel invisible. The wardrobe looked under every piece of furniture, the old paintings on the wall with cracked varnish seemed to follow me with their eyes. When I reached the second floor, my chest felt tight and my forehead was drenched in sweat. The hallway stretched before me, and I felt like something was going to grab me. I buried myself, sure enough the footsteps returned, this time right behind me. The hair on my body stood on top of my head and a jolt of adrenaline ran through my veins. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the empty space. My heart races, and the figure slides around the corner into the attic stairs. When I reached the base of that narrow staircase, I hesitated. A damp smell like rotting wood and ancient dust overhead, piles of old blankets, a sudden scratching sound cutting through the silence. A box slid across the floor, seemingly mine, and I felt my stomach contract. I was getting close, as sweat hit my forehead, when suddenly as it appeared, nothing moved in this attic. As I ran, I almost tripped back up the attic stairs. My heart was pounding so hard I was worried it might burst. I rushed into the hallway, half blind. At that time, I made decisions I cannot explain. But a moment later, I felt as if something had given way to me with a groan beyond the wind. Once again, the wind roared, but it felt like a relief compared to the oppressive silence inside. I walked that night, my heart pounding, my eyes tearing until I finally got my car and drove on the empty highway, every mile separating me from that farm. But no matter how far I run, no matter how much light I have in my mind, some places remain abandoned in my memory. I still let my sanity guard down, so that it can unravel what remains. I remember the first time I entered the abandoned city theater at night. As soon as I walked through the rusty side door, an uneasy feeling rose like a wave in the air, like an undeniable sign of my presence. The first impression was enough to send a life-slicing frost down my body. I knew immediately that the nights ahead would not be kind to my nerves. As the person assigned to inspect this place, I had to make sure no one wandered in to make it their home, and nothing to make things my job. No matter how many times I told myself, the feeling of being watched with every move stuck to my skin. Every evening, I passed by squeezed lamps, posters from the past. The creative images of dancers and actors are now cracked and fading. I often try to imagine the theater as it must be bustling with vibrant crowds, with music, but what remains is only my silent echo. But never more than an indistinct shape sliding between rows of seats, or darting behind a curtain. As I banged my head around, there were only chairs in neat lines, covered in a thin layer of dust, and heavy curtains hanging motionless. My breathing becomes ragged every time I recall the rumor surrounding this place, that it is haunted by the unsettled energies of past performers. I had never believed in that kind of thing before, but I couldn't deny that every time I stood on stage, my presence made me pop. Whenever I look for signs of an intruder, more often than not I see nothing, but I feel uneasy. The air is holding its breath. The tension became unbearable. I felt a complete reaction that I couldn't explain, but I continued. The velvet seats were rotten and worn, and the place smelled like an attic that had been forgotten for decades. Just as I felt a coldness pass through the rest of the theater, through my coat and up my nose, the sky outside was a sickly orange from the light pollution. The hallway leading to the main box seemed more stuffy than usual. My mouth is very dry. My skin kind of felt numb and cold at the same time. I was alone, but primal fear coursed through my body, and I felt a faint brush of air on my neck. Every muscle in me is stiff. I couldn't fathom facing those invisible presences lurking in my vision. I tried to talk to a colleague who had briefly helped with theater security before being abandoned. He also said that he heard strange things. Although he laughed, he retained his sanity. I began a personal routine of slowly walking up and down every aisle, methodically shining my flashlight at each seat and gently pushing back the curtains in the backstage area to confirm nothing was hidden there. Then I'll double-check the half-unloaded audio equipment while my ropes are coiled up. Even when I tried to ignore it, the feeling of being watched never left me. Especially after that night on the 9th floor, when I saw the shadow pass by the window. Even though I had checked the security logs and no one but me had entered or exited the building, the feeling that I was not alone stuck with me, as if there was an invisible force pulling me into the inexplicable world. The next night, I returned to the 9th floor, not to do work, but to face what I couldn't explain. It felt like an invisible force pulling me towards that dark hallway. The fluorescent lights still flickered like faint spots of light on the walls, each flickering like a warning. I walked down the hallway, but this time there wasn't just silence. A strange sound echoed from behind. It is not the sound of the electrical system or motion sensors. It was a gentle sigh, unmistakable, and immediately followed by the sound of slow, gentle footsteps. I turned around but only saw tense shadows falling across the floor. The feeling of fear spread through my body like a wave. My heart was pounding, I couldn't breathe. Something is following me, I know it. And it's not just my imagination. A presence was watching me from the darkness. Footsteps, vague whispers every time I walked towards the small window at the end of the hallway. I stood there dumbfounded as those footsteps came closer, as if they were trying to tell me something. And then, a blurry shadow passed behind me. I turned around, the light of my flashlight illuminating the hallway, but there was no one. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. I knew something in that closed room was waiting for me, as if it was calling me forward. I walked towards the door, my hand trembling on the cold doorknob. Every step was like a punch to my nerves, making me feel like I was about to collapse. The door didn't open, but I could feel an inexplicable force pushing me back. Suddenly, the sigh rang out again, this time from the other side of the door. I tried not to look at the opaque window, but my eyes were drawn towards it. It was a vague silhouette, a shape that couldn't be clearly identified, but I knew it was there, just behind the glass. I can't explain how I felt at that moment. Fear, confusion, and a little curiosity. I can no longer stand still. I turned around and ran out of the hallway and down the stairs. Each step sounded like an echo of my fear. When I ran out of the building, my breathing was erratic and sweat drenched my body. But no matter where I ran, I couldn't escape that presence. I drove like a sleepwalker, feeling that everything around me was deforming. I only have one unanswered question left in my mind: am I really facing something beyond my understanding? The next day, I decided to go back. Not because of work, but because I felt an inexplicable urge. I knew there was something there that I needed to face. The flashing lights still existed, and the sigh still echoed in my mind. That building is calling me. With determination, I returned to the 9th floor. But this time, I didn't just walk through silent hallways. I went into a closed room, where no one knew of its existence. I used a key that I had obtained during a previous inspection. Suddenly, that door opened. Inside is a cold, dusty space. The walls were faded by time, and in the middle of the dark space was an old chair, worn and long abandoned. I approached and felt the suffocating silence. And when I touched that chair, I heard a soft hiss from behind, causing me to turn around. This time, I can't explain what I felt. A cold wind blew through the room, and then a gentle laugh rang out, but it didn't come from anyone. At this moment, I knew clearly, I had awakened something that should not be awakened. Body tense like a string. I knew I had to go on, to face the inexplicable, but part of me, a tiny part, wanted to turn around and leave forever. But I can't. I couldn't leave behind that strangeness, the things I tried to make sense of, and the undeniable feeling that this building had something hidden within it. As the elevator doors closed, I felt a sudden wave of fear wash over me. Now it wasn't the fear of being watched anymore, but the fear of what I was about to face. The hallway light flickered weakly in front of me, the light seemed to be gradually fading, as if it was about to end, and I would be the one to witness that end. I stepped out of the elevator, but my steps were slower and heavier, as if I were moving in an eternal space with no way out. The feeling of stuffiness rose in waves, the air was thick as if this building was trying to swallow me whole. Every step along the hallway, I clearly felt a cold feeling running down my spine, a feeling that I couldn't explain. As I approached the last office, where I had encountered the disturbing event the night before, a cold wind blew past, hitting me like an invisible hand. The sensor light behind me started flashing again, but this time, I didn't activate it. Rather, it was as if someone was moving to my exact rhythm, so that every step was in sync with that flashing light. That last office remained the same as before, but this time I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. The musty smell was still thick in the air, nothing had changed, but part of me felt like someone was standing in the darkness of that room, watching me. I bent down, picked up the flashlight I accidentally dropped earlier, and shined the light into the dark corner of the room. I can't explain why, but I feel that I am no longer alone. Not just because there was a dim light illuminating the space, but because I felt the presence of something, standing there, a presence that was not human. A ghost, an inexplicable creature, or a reflection of all the fears I've experienced. My flashlight suddenly turned off. And in a moment of silence, I heard a soft sound like a sigh echoing in the darkness. I turned around, my heart pounding in my chest. But when I look into space, I see nothing. There's no one. Just silence, heavy and suffocating. I stood there, trying to calm myself down. It was just my paranoia, I told myself. But as I turned to walk out, the light suddenly brightened again, and I felt a change in the air. Something in space was changing, as if an invisible force was moving around me. I no longer have the courage to continue walking. Instead, I turned around, looking again toward the end of the hallway. At that moment, I heard slow, very light footsteps coming from behind me. A cold feeling enveloped me, and I could do nothing but stand still, hoping that it was only the echo of my own footsteps, or the overextension of my mind. But I can't lie to myself anymore. I felt that presence more clearly than ever, as if it were moving towards me, and once again, I saw that faint shadow, passing over the wall, then disappearing into the darkness. I ran, my legs seemed to no longer carry any weight, leaving only a feeling of darkness surrounding me. My hand clenched the key so tightly that my fingers became numb, while the air around me became even heavier. My footsteps echoed in the hallway, each step a warning to the deathly silence of this building. My feelings felt like they were going on forever, as if I was running through a nightmare with no way out. I hurriedly rushed into the elevator, not daring to turn back. This elevator, although old, was the only place I could find some safety. The door slowly closed, but for a moment, I could feel the light from the hallway shining through the gap. The shadow still clung to me, still moving with me, even though I tried to escape. My eyes looked at the elevator door, waiting for it to close completely, but everything seemed silent, immersed in a strange space. The feeling is not one of peace of mind when the elevator door closes, but of emptiness. I feel stuck between reality and something else. This building, with all its antiquity and mystery, could have become a trap. The key I still held tightly in my hand seemed heavier than ever, as if it carried an invisible force that was pulling me into a place I couldn't explain. The elevator started moving, I felt each floor move backwards, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, even though I couldn't see it. The night was dark, silent, and the heavy feeling in the air made it impossible to breathe easily. When the elevator reached the ground floor, the doors opened and I stepped out. I looked around, didn't see anyone. That feeling, an unusual tension, is still stuck in my mind. The feeling of being watched, as if someone or something was silently observing my every move. But I can't give up, I can't simply leave it all behind. Curiosity and fear mixed together, I decided to turn back and try to face something inexplicable. Even though my heart was beating like thunder, even though every step seemed to lead me to a dead end, I still couldn't give up. Because I know that only by facing it can I find the truth. I turned around, this time deciding not to leave until I discovered something in that room. But before I could do anything, I heard a noise behind me, like footsteps. A cold feeling ran down my spine, and in that moment, I knew I was no longer alone in this building. Every night there was a battle with myself. This building was more than just a workplace, it had become a maze of disordered thoughts and an inescapable feeling of being watched. Every step I took in those hallways, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, with no way out. The flashing lights, the unexplained noises, all were signs of a presence I couldn't explain, but couldn't deny. With the key in hand, I entered a tense night, no longer knowing whether I was running or searching. This time, I decided not to just continue working like the previous nights. I needed to face the truth, needed to discover what was hidden behind the walls and locked doors of this building. I felt like I was standing between two worlds, the real world, where I still had to do my job, and the invisible world this building had brought me into, where time and memories overlapped. I slipped the key into my hand, feeling every crack in the metal as I held it. It was heavy, carrying a strange feeling that I couldn't describe in words. Turning my eyes towards the dark hallway, I walked, feeling like I was being watched from behind. Every shadow in the corner, every flickering light seemed to be taking me into a battle with myself, with the fear that had haunted me for so many nights. Every step I took made the air thicker, it felt like there was an invisible weight pressing down on me. The door at the southern end of the hallway opened, but no one was there. There was only dead silence, and long shadows in the dim light of the flashlight. I pressed the key into the old lock on the wooden door. It rotated easily, but something prevented me from entering. An invisible force was holding me back, and I could do nothing but stand there, facing the silence in that space. And then, I heard a noise. Soft, but enough to make me shiver, a step, a vague, almost inaudible sound. It didn't come from anywhere, but from the space around me, as if this wall could breathe, could live. I started to feel something changing inside me. The initial feeling of panic gradually turned into determination. I can't give up. This building, no matter how haunting and scary, cannot overcome me. I entered the room, feeling like I was passing through a door that was not only physical but also a door of inescapable memories and fears. When the light from my flashlight shined on me, I noticed strange marks. An old notebook on the table, a blurry photo of someone I didn't recognize, fingerprints that didn't belong to me. And finally, I discovered the unbelievable, another door, a forgotten door, which led me into another dimension. A space separate from what I knew. Every step into it was a challenge to what I once believed to be true, and with each passing moment, I realized that this building, with all its mystery, might hold stories I had never known. Stories that I was forced to face, whether I wanted to or not. With each passing night, the space around me became more and more strange. The small noises I imagined became even clearer. I convinced myself that it was because of the old building, with its rusty walls and damaged equipment, but there was no denying that the feeling of unease still existed, an inexplicable fear that clung to me every time I entered there. Even though there were no obvious signs, I couldn't stop thinking about the mirror in the kitchen. There was something wrong about it, about the way it was placed in that corner, facing the wall as if it was watching me. I began to feel that everything in this building might be part of an unspoken game that I was unaware of, as if someone or something was manipulating me, forcing me into these situations. I couldn't take it anymore. It felt like an invisible hand was pulling me into a spiral of fear and stress. The lights flickered above my head, and every dark corner in the kitchen seemed to be opening up other dimensions that I couldn't see. The feeling of someone standing behind me, the silhouettes moving quickly across my perspective made me feel uneasy. That night, I decided to face everything. I picked up the old mirror, determined to find the truth. The cold feeling from the mirror passed through my hand as I lifted it, and in that moment, I looked at my reflection. But instead of just seeing myself, I realized there was a figure standing behind me, vague, but very clear. Unable to breathe, I turned around, my heart beating so fast that I almost choked. But there was no one, only silence and darkness surrounding me. So I turned back to the mirror, and this time, the figure was still there. The feeling of fear overwhelmed me, making me unable to leave. I stood still, not daring to look back, and quietly let the mirror fall from my hand, when the surrounding space suddenly became unusually quiet. Every night, that presence becomes clearer. The feeling of being watched was no longer a vague feeling, but a real presence, something inexplicable waiting for me in the darkness. This building has become a mess of strange events, which I cannot ignore. And every time I walked through the dark hallways, a part of me wondered, was I becoming a part of these very events, or was I simply a victim trapped in a game with no way out? I breathed and my hands trembled as I clutched the flashlight. Light, unidentifiable footsteps echoed in the vast space of the empty hallway. I turned around, a flash of light, making the darkness around me seem thicker, as if something was moving quickly behind me. My heartbeat was pounding in my ears. I had to use all my strength not to turn back, not to run away, to face what was happening. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure, but then there was a light noise coming from behind, like a light sigh, patting the air, making me jump. I turned around, the light flickered across the pots and old utensils on the floor. Nobody. Nothing. Everything remained the same, cold and empty. But that feeling, the feeling that someone was watching me, still couldn't be shaken off. With shaking hands, I took a few steps forward, toward the dark area behind the freezer. Each step seemed to last forever, each gust of wind, each small sound startled me. As I got closer, the lights flickered again, this time making the space more eerie than ever, the faint light shining into the corners as if the walls were blinking, watching me. And then, when the lights suddenly flashed, I saw a tiny dark shadow, passing through the freezer window. Just for a moment, but enough to make my heart stop beating. It was a very small figure, seemingly human, but it wasn't. It twisted, blurred, and disappeared soon after. My heart tightened, as if there was a real presence there, right under my vision. The sounds become clearer. I could hear tapping, strange noises from somewhere in the air, but every time I turned around, I saw nothing but darkness. But this time, I was sure that there was something there, in the back, waiting. I can't continue like this anymore. I stopped, startled as a cold feeling from behind invaded my body. A cold air blew past me as if someone was standing right behind me, silently looking at me. Even though my body was ready to run, I tried to stand still. It feels like I'm stuck in a trap that this building has created. Light footsteps sounded again. This time they weren't from far away but from right behind me. I can't bear it anymore. It's time to face what's lurking in the shadows. My heart was determined. I turned around, shining the flashlight into the dark corners of the room, ready to face something or someone. The light was bright, and in that moment, I clearly saw the shadow, a shadowy shape, standing still, watching me. At this moment, I knew, not only was I facing what this building hid, but I was also facing my deepest fear, something that couldn't be explained by logic, but it seemed like I was being drawn into a game with no way out. At dawn, my palms were still sweaty, the feeling of stress still stuck with me, but at least I got through the night. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold and fresh air outside, calming the panic that still lingered within me. But no matter how hard I tried to forget what happened, the strange feelings in the restaurant didn't leave me. The next day, as I sat at home, my mind still couldn't escape what had happened. Strange noises, images in the mirror, all swirled in my thoughts, as if they were clinging to me. I couldn't stop thinking about that mirror, about the shadow I thought I saw in it. And this makes me unable to feel at peace. I went back the next night, for some unknown reason, just an inexplicable urge. I didn't want to let panic control me, but the closer I got, the more I felt the tension in my body. Tonight, everything is silent. There was no knocking, no more movement. But in that silence, I felt more clearly than ever that there was a presence here. A feeling hangs heavy in the air, watching me from afar. I walked through the hallways again, this time faster, like someone with a mission to complete. The light still flickered, but nothing strange, just reflections of familiar shadows. But then, when I entered the kitchen area, I felt something again. An indefinable feeling. I passed that mirror again, and for a moment, I saw a shadowy figure in it. This time, I didn't feel scared. Another feeling appeared in me, a feeling of urgency. I turned back to look in the mirror, stepped closer, and then I saw more clearly. That shadow is not an illusion. It's a part of me, something I can't explain. Perhaps this building not only holds old memories but is also something alive, a part of the past that never lets go. And perhaps, so am I. I stood there, in complete silence, not knowing what to do next. But I know that once I face it, there's no going back. The flashing lights and strange noises will always be there, as a part of me and of this building. A relationship that cannot be explained, but also cannot be avoided. And I understand that that building is more than just a place of work. It is something bigger, something deeper. And I, whether I wanted it or not, became a part of it. I couldn't answer, I just nodded in silence, my mouth dry because I didn't want to admit the greater fear that was brewing inside me. That strange feeling still stuck with me, something that couldn't be clearly described, but it was present in every dark corner, waiting, watching me as I walked down the deserted hallway. The atmosphere in this building is different from any place I have ever worked. Each wall seems to contain secrets, whispers from the past, calls for help that cannot be heard but can be felt in the air. I began to not only hear strange noises but also feel them. The slight vibrations on the ground as I walked, the lingering cold breath, and the flickering lights in the empty rooms. Everything seemed to tell me I wasn't alone, even though there was no one else in the building at night. Sometimes, I ask myself if this fear is a product of loneliness, or if there really is something in this building waiting. Telling myself that I was just imagining it, I tried to quell my doubts, but I could not dispel the feeling of being watched, an invisible presence that made it impossible for me to relax for a second. Every night as I patrolled, I felt like I was playing a dangerous game, as if this building was testing me, wanting me to find the truth or give it up forever. The light from the flashlight seemed to fade as I approached the dark areas, only making the darkness seem thicker, and each hidden corner of the building became even more confusing. That night, I decided not to let fear win. I was tired of these strange, unexplainable feelings. I needed to find out the truth, and I knew there was only one way: to face it head-on. I didn't know what was waiting for me in the darkness of the room at the end of the hallway, where every time I looked in, it felt like someone was standing behind the wall, waiting. This time, I won't come back. I walked forward, clutching the old key, feeling each step through the hallway. My footsteps echoed in the quiet space, as if each sound of mine was being challenged by something invisible. As I approached the door, a small noise rang out from inside the room, a gentle, creaking sound that made me shiver. That door is waiting for me. With each labored breath, I turned the doorknob. Every movement I made seemed to slow down in the air, as if time had stopped. The door opened slowly, and I couldn't stop to turn around. A challenge, aimed at me. Every night, I continued to walk through the long, dark hallways, as a test of my courage. This building seemed to have an invisible force, something supernatural clinging to it, waiting for me to continue through the open doors, the shadows waiting to devour. I don't know why I still stayed. Perhaps it was because of an unquenchable sense of curiosity, or perhaps it was simply because I couldn't face the fact that I was living in this haunted place. Every time I tried to leave, I felt as if a strange presence was pulling me back. The following nights became even more difficult. Light footsteps are no longer a shadow that I can ignore. The fluorescent lights no longer just flickered, but sometimes flickered as if there was an intervention, as if they were testing me, testing my reason. Every sound, every movement seemed to have a purpose, as if an invisible arm was reaching out from the darkness. One night, as I approached the door of the generator room, the familiar feeling appeared again. Everything inside me screamed that I shouldn't come any closer, but I couldn't stop. From the darkness, a sigh, as if something had been waiting there for me for a long time, waiting for me to enter. I couldn't move, just stood there, my head spinning in fear. I entered the room reluctantly, like a cornered animal. In the dark room, only the sound of my breathing mixed with a strange, inexplicable murmur. The door closed behind me with a strong click, and I knew there was no way out for me. A wave of nausea hit me, but I couldn't back away. I stood there, the dim light illuminating abandoned equipment, old machines, machine parts one had never noticed before. In this space, there is something incomprehensible. Not silence, not darkness, but a sense of anticipation that I could feel, as if something was about to happen. My pulse quickened, my throat felt dry as if it were tight, and I felt that the presence in the room was drawing closer, approaching like a fire in the darkness. The lights went out, there was no light left, and I stood in the cold space, enveloped by an indescribable fear. And went out, sighing in relief, as if all the tension in my body had been released. Still, I couldn't shake off the strange feeling in my stomach, something inexplicable, something I couldn't fully understand. It felt like I was in a paranoid dream that I couldn't wake up from. The next day, when I went back to work, everything seemed more normal. The windows lit up in the daylight, the empty room seemed less scary with the sunlight streaming in, but the feeling of anxiety still lingered within me. I couldn't help but think about what happened last night: strange noises, fleeting shadows, doors opening and closing on their own, and unexplained flashing lights. It seemed like there was something in the air, a presence, something that never wanted me to be at peace in that building. I tried to convince myself that everything had a reason, that I was just tired and maybe imagining things. But then the following nights, everything started repeating again. Soft tapping sounds in the distance, movements in the mirror, and the occasional sigh whose origin I couldn't identify. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that there was something I couldn't see, but was always present around me. One night, as I was checking the electrical equipment and walking through the hallway, I noticed the light from the ceiling lights flickering as if someone was moving under them. I stopped, looked around, but there was nothing but darkness and empty rooms. The knocking sound, clearer this time, came from the end of the hallway. I walked towards it, my heart beating fast, my eyes tense, searching for any sign of movement. As I neared the end of the hallway, I saw a hidden room door. It opened strangely, unlike the previous times. My flashlight lit up, shining on the walls, and suddenly, I saw a silhouette pass by in the mirror. But when I turned around, there was nothing there. A cold feeling ran down my spine, and I could hear my heart pounding. I know that I cannot continue to live in this fear anymore. Part of me wants to leave everything behind. But another part, the curious part, can't stop wanting to learn. Am I haunted by this building? Or is there really something inexplicable waiting for me there? Finally, I decided to go into the electrical equipment room again. This time, I brought a camera with me to record what I saw, if anything happened. The door closed behind me, and I felt cold air from behind. The sound of light breathing rang out again in the dark space, and I couldn't be sure whether it was my voice or something else. The light from the camera illuminated the walls, and I knew that I was entering a mystery that could not be explained. This isn't just a job anymore. It has become a psychological battle, a challenge to myself. I must face this darkness, no matter what force it is. I will not run away. You can control this fear, that there is nothing to worry about. I sat there, looking at the darkness that was covering the space around me, trying to push away the strange images that I couldn't understand. But that silence, that stillness made me feel more stressed than ever. A small noise, like the whisper of a gentle breeze passing by, rang out from the dark corner of the living room. I turned my head, only to see nothing but darkness, but still felt something, a presence that I couldn't put my finger on. Sweat began to form on my forehead again, and I could feel my heart beating faster. I breathed deeply, trying to calm down, reminding myself that it was all just a product of a tired imagination. But then, again, I felt something move, not in the air, but within myself. A change in feeling, a chill running down my spine made me shiver. I stood up, determined to face it. I started walking down the hallway, staring into the darkness ahead. The flashlight in my hand trembled, the weak light emitting dim streaks of light on the walls. The feeling of being watched came back strong again, and I couldn't stop, I couldn't turn back. Something waits for me in the dark. A presence that I couldn't see but could feel very clearly. Every step I took in the long hallway made me feel heavier, as if the space around me was shrinking, ready to swallow me inside. The light from my flashlight was not strong enough to dispel the black darkness that was gradually invading every corner. I approached the window at the end of the hallway, where I could look out. The faint lights from the buildings outside only added to the quiet and eerie feeling. Suddenly, I heard a soft noise, very close, as if someone was standing right behind me. A cold wind rushed in, as if it had just appeared from somewhere else, and I turned around, my heart pounding. But there was no one there. My palms were sweaty, but I couldn't leave. Something inside me urged me to stay, to face something I couldn't explain. That feeling was no longer one of simple fear, it was the urge, the need to explore, knowing that I might never understand what was really going on. I turned around, walked toward the door, and when I looked in the glass, I saw myself again. But this time, I didn't just see myself. In the reflection, I saw a figure standing behind me. The darkness stretched out, as if someone's figure was standing there, just waiting for the moment to appear. Throat and spread throughout the body. The phone call was off, but I could still feel the tension in the air, as if something invisible was waiting, watching me, even in these quiet moments. With my hands still shaking, I walked to the bedroom, trying to avoid looking at the phone I had left on the table. Every step in the deserted house seemed longer and heavier. Although I didn't hear any strange sounds anymore, I still felt a heavy presence, as if this house was watching me from every angle. When I entered the bedroom, I locked the door carefully, pulled the curtains and turned on the lights. I can't stand the silence anymore. The feeling of insecurity inside me is increasing, like an invisible darkness hovering, waiting for me to step out. I know that nothing can change this feeling. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get rid of it. My eyes gradually blurred, tired after a long day. But in my head, those strange images and sounds kept repeating over and over again. Despite your advice, I cannot escape the feeling that I am being watched, hunted. In the dark night, my thoughts are like strings woven together, forming a net that tightly surrounds my mind. Every passing breeze startled me, making me stop breathing, feeling like something was touching my skin. I can't remember how many times during the night I woke up, just to look around, feeling like there was someone standing right behind me. I didn't dare turn around, didn't dare face the darkness behind, because I was afraid that I would see a shape standing there, looking at me with lifeless eyes. No matter what I do, no matter how I try to rationalize things, that feeling doesn't go away. It seemed like this house, with all its flashing lights, strange noises, and feeling of being watched, had become an inseparable part of my life. Maybe, I was falling into an endless loop where my fears were controlling reality, or maybe, this house actually had a presence that I couldn't understand. A feeling of unease filled the air as I walked down the hospital hallway, each step echoing in the eerie silence. Although I tried my best to push away the strange memories of that phone call, the feeling that I was not alone in this space once again clung to me. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling illuminated the long hallway, creating strange shadows in every hidden corner, as if they were waiting for me, ready to wait for me in moments of tension and fear. Each flicker of light seemed to increase my restlessness, making it impossible for me to escape the anxiety that had taken over my mind. At first, I thought it was all just a psychological reaction from prolonged stress. But after working here for many nights, I began to realize that something was wrong. Not everything I feel can be explained scientifically. Sometimes, the shadows at the edges of my vision seem not just a hallucination caused by fatigue, but something real lurking in the darkness. That prompted me to start looking at things again, trying to understand this invisible presence. I can't help but wonder, is this house, or hospital building, really a place that holds dark memories, invisible fears that we can't see but can still feel? Some nights, I feel like everything is watching me. The shadows in the corners aren't just a product of my imagination. And every time night falls, I feel the faint light from the fluorescent lights become stronger, a light that seems to want to take me into darkness. Once again, I began to doubt everything I had been through. Could it be that I have opened a door that cannot be closed, where darkness and fear have entered my life? It got to the point where I couldn't simply ignore it anymore. I'm no longer just worried about strange noises or fleeting shadows. What I was feeling was that something really existed in the darkness of this building, and it seemed to be waiting for a moment to confront me. The feeling of fear still haunted me every night when I entered the hospital, as if it had penetrated every brick and every wall of the building. I couldn't shake off the inexplicable feeling that there was something in this space that I couldn't see but could clearly feel. And the more I face strange phenomena, the more I understand that there is a truth beyond the reach of logic and science. Everything in the hospital, from strange noises to doors that open by themselves, is part of an unexplained mystery. But every night, I tried to continue doing my work, even though I knew in my heart that there was a presence watching me, mocking my strength. That feeling became so familiar that I could no longer distinguish truth from illusion. The automatic door, flashing lights, and those strange noises seemed to have become a part of me, even though I didn't want to admit it. I'm not as scared as I was the first time. Gradually, I began to accept the fact that there was something in the hospital that I could not fully understand, nor could I explain it with simple theories. The long nights were no longer an invisible terror but became a battle with myself, with fear taking over me little by little. No matter what, every night I stood still, breathed deeply and welcomed the cold feeling that the building brought. I don't run away anymore, I don't try to explain what is incomprehensible. Because I know that sometimes, in the dark and unexplainable mysteries, we must learn to face and live with them. Every morning when I wake up, as the dawn light begins to dispel the darkness, I feel a small sense of victory. A victory not because I understood everything, but because I'm still here, standing firm, even though something invisible still lurks in the hallway every night at 2 a.m. And maybe, that's all I need to keep going. Thank you for following this story. If you have felt the horror and unforgettable hauntings, then that is what we always find in ghost stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories. Hope you all stay safe, and if you ever step into a dark place, don't forget to look back, because sometimes, a shadow can be more than just a shadow. Thank you for listening.